Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The Omega girl swept the courtyard under a sky streaked with sunrise. Her arms ached as she pressed the broom across the wide flagstones, scattering dust motes into the dawn air. Although her muscles screamed from waking at first light, she forced herself to work diligently. She dared not slack off, because that courtyard was the entrance to the Alpha's residence, and had to be immaculate before the pack's high-ranking members arrived for breakfast. She paused for a moment and glanced at the grand stone archway that led inside the pack's main house. Golden morning light illuminated the intricately carved wolves that seemed almost alive in the shadows, each symbol representing centuries of tradition. For as long as she could remember, she had existed on the periphery, always trying to catch glimpses of those in power, while staying invisible enough to avoid scolding. Yet even as an Omega, she carried inside her a flicker of determination. She wanted more from life than an endless menial routine. From behind her, a sharp voice startled her. "Hurry up! The new beta will be here soon, and if she finds dust in the entryway, you will regret it." The words belonged to Ingrid, a lower-ranked wolf who loved taking her frustrations out on anyone with less status. Seeing the Omega stoop or hasten her tasks always gave Ingrid a smug sense of authority. "Yes, I understand," came the quiet reply, though the Omega kept her gaze lowered. Yet behind her respectful posture, her soul coiled with defiance. She swept faster, wanting to avoid punishment. The pack offered no mercy to those who failed to follow orders, especially the Omega ranks. At that moment, a hush fell upon the courtyard. The main door creaked open, revealing the tall, muscular figure of the pack alpha, Alaric. His expression was distant, brow creased with an unspoken sorrow that had become a permanent fixture on his face since the death of his mate. He wore a close-fitting shirt over broad shoulders, and his presence radiated authority even in silence. He stepped into the courtyard without sparing a glance at anyone in particular. He rarely acknowledged the Omegas these days. When his true mate had been alive, she had forced the Alpha to at least show basic courtesy to the lower class. But ever since she passed, that warmth evaporated from his demeanor. Even so, the Omega girl felt a pang of sympathy for him, a silent echo of his grieving heart. Ingrid immediately stopped barking orders and bowed her head, trying to appear submissive. The Omega did the same, letting her broom rest at her side while Alaric walked by. He disappeared around the corner, leaving only his shadow trailing long and thin across the courtyard. The tension he carried lingered in the air. Once the Alpha was gone, Ingrid shot the Omega a look of contempt. "Go help in the kitchens," she growled before marching inside to fawn over the higher-ranked wolves. The Omega exhaled, feeling relief that no further confrontation came. She gripped her broom again, gave the courtyard one last check for stray leaves or pebbles, and then hurried toward the kitchens at the back of the estate. The corridors were narrow, lit by flickering sconces mounted on rough stone walls. She stepped lightly, trying not to draw attention from passing guards or ranked members. Being an Omega meant she had to be silent and unassuming, lest she incite anyone's temper. She breathed deeply, inhaling the aroma of fresh bread and soup wafting from the kitchen. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger, but she knew better than to take anything without permission. Inside the kitchen, older women bustled about carrying platters of food, eggs, roasted vegetables, and bread rolls. Steam rose from large pots on the stove, fogging the air. The Omega quickly approached one of the battered wooden counters to begin chopping herbs. An older cook, her hair in a messy bun, nodded in acknowledgement. "We are swamped this morning," she said. "We need these greens chopped for the lunch stew." The Omega nodded, picked up a knife, and got to work. Swiftly, she cut through handfuls of herbs, letting the repetitive motion soothe her mind. Knife, slice, gather, repeat. It was better than dealing with the drama in the corridors. Yet even as she settled into the routine, she felt a strange sense of anticipation churning within her. It had been a few weeks since the Alpha's mate had died unexpectedly in her sleep. Rumors swept through the pack, speculating about what would happen next. Could an Alpha function without a Luna by his side for long? Some whispered that the moon goddess would choose another Luna. Others believed that the Alpha might close his heart permanently. A quiet voice at the next counter pulled the Omega from her thoughts. Psst, but Beta overheard something. "They say there will be a Luna trial soon." The speaker was a young kitchen assistant with soft brown hair. The Omega froze, the knife mid-slice. "A Luna trial?" she whispered, feeling a jolt of disbelief. It was rare. Typically, the lunar role fell to the Alpha's mate chosen by the goddess. But, in unusual circumstances, the pack invoked the trials. Those trials tested potential candidates in various tasks of cunning, loyalty, and resilience, culminating in a final challenge that was often dangerous, some claimed lethal. They were designed to ensure the wolf, chosen as Luna, was worthy of the seat. "That's what they say," the assistant continued. "Several female wolves from prominent families are already preparing. They believe the goddess may reveal her sign soon, or the elders will. Either way, there is talk that any unattached female in the pack might need to compete for the spot." The assistant paused and looked at the Omega sympathetically. "I hope we're spared from that. Omegas can't survive something like that, right?" The Omega forced a brittle laugh, though worry twisted in her chest. "Right. That must be for the higher-ranking wolves." She tried to convince herself that the trials were none of her concern. Omegas rarely found themselves placed in the center of pack politics. Yet a nameless tension gripped her, as though fate's gears were turning, and she was powerless to stop them. That evening, the pack gathered in the large auditorium that doubled as a banquet hall. Rows of wooden benches stretched toward a raised platform. Normally, meetings of this scale were reserved for important announcements. The Omega found a discreet spot near the back, where most of her rank huddled together, hoping not to draw unwanted attention. A subtle buzz of speculation echoed through the crowd. Some sounded excited, others worried. Occasional glances were cast toward the Alpha, who sat rigidly in the seat of honor, flanked by a few elders and high-ranking wolves. Finally, one of the elders rose from his chair. He was a tall man with graying temples and a grim expression. "Brothers and sisters of the pack," he began, "we are here to address the loss of our beloved Luna. Her absence has shaken us all. The Alpha stands without a Luna by his side, and the bond that once anchored him is severed." A hush fell, and the elder's voice resonated. "The future stability of our pack depends on leadership that is blessed by the moon goddess. While the Alpha remains our unwavering protector, tradition demands a Luna's guidance. Therefore, by the authority entrusted to us, we declare that a Luna trial shall begin 1 week from now." Gasps and whispers rose in waves across the hall. Some she-wolves sat up straighter, eyes gleaming with ambition. Others looked pale, well aware of the danger such a trial involved. The Omega felt her heart skip a beat. Even though she assumed only the strong and influential would be considered, she sensed an undercurrent that no one could completely predict who might be summoned. The elder continued, "Eligible she-wolves will be tested on resilience, loyalty, and devotion to the pack. The final selection lies with the moon goddess. The wolf who passes every trial will stand beside our Alpha as the crate." Next, Luna. He stepped back, and Alaric rose. The entire hall went silent. The Alpha's gaze roamed over the assembled faces. Pain and reluctance weighed in his eyes. He drew a careful breath. "I will respect the pack's traditions," he said quietly, "even if it goes against my personal wish to mourn longer." A flicker of sorrow crossed his features. "May the goddess guide us to a new Luna worthy of leading you. That is all." He turned and left the stage, giving no one a chance to question or protest. The hush in the hall lingered, then broke into fervent discussions. The Omega lingered near the back, feeling a little dizzy. A part of her dreaded the spectacle that would follow. Another part wondered if the trials would usher in a new era for the pack. Over the coming days, the atmosphere in the pack intensified. Several ambitious young she-wolves from wealthy or warrior families strutted through the corridors, brandishing their readiness to compete in the trials. Some worked themselves to the point of exhaustion in the training grounds, honing their combat techniques or practicing stealth challenges. Others spent hours in the library studying pack laws, hoping their knowledge of tradition would serve them well. Meanwhile, the Omega tried to keep her head down, though the topic of the trials infiltrated every corner. Even in the laundry rooms or while scrubbing floors, all the conversation among her fellow Omegas revolved around predictions of who would enter the trials. Names of high-profile contenders were tossed around, as if they were already the designated favorites. No one, of course, mentioned the possibility of an Omega stepping up to claim the Luna title. The notion was laughable in their society. One afternoon, however, an unexpected visitor appeared while the Omega was delivering freshly laundered clothes to the Beta's wing. The new Beta, Natalia, was a formidable woman with chestnut hair tied in a sleek ponytail. She happened to open her door just as the Omega was kneeling, carefully placing folded garments by the threshold. Natalia's sharp eyes took in the sight of the Omega with a detached curiosity. She cleared her throat. "You are the one who helps in the kitchens and cleaning, correct?" The Omega swallowed. "Yes, Beta. I take care of whatever chores are assigned to me." Natalia nodded thoughtfully. "So you must know quite a bit about the daily workings of this pack. Sometimes I find Omegas have more information than anyone else, as you move so quietly in the background." She studied the Omega's face for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Have you heard any rumors about who might have the best chance at winning the trials?" Caught off guard, the Omega felt her cheeks burn. "There is talk that many trained warriors will participate. I do not know who is favored." Natalia tilted her head. "Yes, that is obvious," she replied. "I suppose what I really want to know is whether the goddess has chosen anyone yet. On rare occasions, there are omens or dreams before the trials begin. Has the goddess shown you anything?" The Omega shook her head. "I have not received any signs. I am sorry." Natalia's gaze lingered for an uncomfortable instant. Then she shrugged. "Very well. If you do hear of anything, let me know." She turned on her heel and closed the door, leaving the Omega blinking in confusion. It was unusual for someone as high-ranking as the Beta to ask an Omega about visions from the moon goddess. Such dreams typically came to those with strong lineage or extraordinary potential. Still, the Omega told herself not to dwell on it. She likely would never be involved, aside from setting up for the ceremonies or cleaning after the competitions. Yet as the date of the trials approached, she couldn't shake a mounting sense of unease. On the eve of the trials, the pack hosted a ceremonial vigil in the main courtyard. A large bonfire crackled, sparks dancing upward into the dark sky. Women who planned to participate wore cloaks embroidered with their family crests, each symbol proud and defiant in the firelight. One by one, they stepped forward to toss a white flower into the flames, representing their resolve to serve the pack if chosen as Luna. The Omega stood at the edge of the crowd, hugging her arms to ward off the night chill. The dancing embers illuminated anxious expressions and resolute stares. The entire pack watched with anticipation, even if some harbored doubts about whether a new Luna could truly fill the void left by the Alpha's lost mate. Without warning, an elder's voice rang out. "We invite all who would heed the goddess's call to approach the fire." A hush fell as the elder continued. "If your heart compels you, step forward now. The flame will bear witness to your vow." The cloaked women in the center of the courtyard remained steady, but the elder's words were clearly an invitation for anyone else in the pack who felt they might be chosen. A long pause followed, as though the entire crowd held its breath. Someone coughed. The only sound otherwise was the crackling of fire. To everyone's surprise, a faint tremor rippled through the ground. The Omega felt it beneath her feet, a subtle quaking that made her heart pound. She glanced around, certain others must feel it too. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some looked at the sky, as though expecting a thunderclap or gust of wind. But the sky was clear, filled with stars. The gentle quake vanished as quickly as it had arrived. An ancient rumor whispered that if the moon goddess directly bestowed her favor, the earth might shiver in acknowledgement. But it was also said that the sign could be misunderstood or missed. In that moment, the Omega's heart raced with a bizarre sensation of being singled out, of some invisible presence focusing on her. Yet she could not fathom why the goddess would choose an Omega over the countless stronger candidates. She tried to dismiss the notion, forcing herself to remain still. Yet an irresistible compulsion welled up inside her. She found her feet taking a single step forward, then another, as if guided by an unseen force. She could hardly believe she was moving into the courtyard, edging closer to the fire. Instantly, the crowd murmured in confusion. The women already in the circle parted slightly, startled by the sight of an Omega approaching. Some frowned in clear disapproval. When she finally stood mere steps from the bonfire, her heart hammered so loud she thought everyone could hear it. Her mouth felt dry. Behind her, she sensed the entire pack: Alaric, the elders, the Beta, the high-born families, watching. Her instincts screamed that she had no place here, that everyone would mock her for even dreaming of becoming Luna. But something stronger than fear pulled her forward. The Omega bent down, trembling, and picked up a single white flower from a basket near the fire pit. She met the elder's gaze, finding there an expression of surprise and perhaps something else. Was it curiosity? Then, with every ounce of courage she possessed, she stepped close to the flames. Heat scorched her cheeks as she tossed the blossom onto the burning wood. It was swallowed by the fire, petals curling into ash within moments. The hush that followed felt thunderous. No one seemed to know how to react. After a moment, a scoff came from somewhere in the crowd. Someone else gasped. Then a ripple of muted laughter broke out from a group of well-dressed she-wolves, who obviously considered the Omega's action a foolish prank. A few outraged murmurs rose, hinting that the Omega was overstepping her place. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. She was about to back away and run, wishing she could erase what she had just done, when she felt a faint, overwhelming sense of calm wash over her. It was as if a gentle breeze stroked her hair, though the courtyard had been still. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, and realized she did not regret her decision. Some deeper instinct told her it was the right choice. The elder's voice rang out again, addressing the entire gathering. The Omega girl has placed her flower among the offerings. The goddess accepts all who come forward, Let none cast judgment on the will of the moon. Though the crowd hardly looked convinced, the elders' authority kept them from outright protest. Many turned away, continuing private conversations. The Omega stumbled back from the center of the courtyard, heart thrashing. She had taken a leap she never imagined possible. Even if every other wolf considered her insane, there was no turning back now. That night, she hardly slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt that strange quake beneath her feet again, as if the ground itself were acknowledging a new destiny. She found no comfort in her thin mattress or the darkness of her shared Omega dormitory. The other Omegas were either asleep or lost in their own dreams, oblivious to the enormous weight pressing down on her. Eventually, dawn came, and with it the official start of the Luna trials. The first event was scheduled to begin just after sunrise, at the training ground on the pack's eastern edge. The Omega dressed nervously, not knowing what to wear for such a test. She owned no fancy garments, only a plain tunic and leggings that had been mended more times than she could count. It would have to suffice. She arrived at the training ground to see a line of participants already assembled. Each wore either ceremonial attire or flexible outfits designed for physical challenges. The crowd of onlookers cheered for some of the favored contenders, and many high-ranked wolves stood on an elevated platform to observe. Anxiety knotted in the Omega's stomach as she approached the edge of the training field. An elder's assistant read out the names of each competitor, pausing on the Omega's name as though uncertain. After a tiny hesitation, her name was confirmed, and so she shuffled forward to stand with the others. She could feel their disdain, but at least one or two gave her polite nods, perhaps unwilling to discount her completely. Others, however, laughed under their breath or stared at her with scorn. A tall, imposing male elder strode to the center of the field. He wore a burgundy robe adorned with emblems of the moon, and his voice carried tremendous weight. Welcome to the first test of the Luna trials. This challenge focuses on your capacity to endure physical and mental hardships that might threaten our pack. You will race through a designated path in the forest beyond these span grounds. Along the way, you must retrieve a silver pendant from a hidden post and return it to this field. The post is shrouded by illusions to test your perseverance. Only those who truly seek to fulfill their calling can find it. A murmur of excitement and nervousness rolled through the participants. The elder continued, "Speed alone will not suffice. Instinct and grit will be tested, as illusions can mislead your senses and cause you to lose your way. The first few to return with the pendant will demonstrate their readiness to continue in the trials. Those who fail to retrieve it or do not make it back within the allotted time will be eliminated." He signaled for everyone to stand at the edge of the field. Drums began beating a rhythmic pulse, echoing across the clearing. The sun crept higher, lending warmth to the cool morning air. The Omega's heart hammered as she forced herself into a starting position. The other competitors looked confident, some even smirking in her direction. She wondered how many had trained extensively for moments like this. No part of her was physically prepared for a demanding race or illusions that might confuse her. Yet before she could dwell on her fears, the elder dropped his arm in a swift motion. The drums thundered. Instantly, the participants bolted forward. Adrenaline surged through the Omega's veins, and she sprinted as best she could, arms pumping, feet pounding on grass that soon gave way to rocky forest paths. She inhaled the scent of pine and damp earth. The other competitors fanned out, each following a route deeper into the forest. It seemed there was no single defined path, so everyone had to rely on instinct or strategy. She tried to follow a few contestants she recognized as skilled, hoping they might lead her in the right direction. But almost immediately, she felt a subtle disorientation. The trees appeared to shift, and the forest floor seemed to twist at the edges of her vision. She blinked, stumbling slightly, convinced that the illusions were already at play. Glancing around, she saw that a warrior-class she-wolf named Regina had charged ahead without pause, apparently untroubled by the illusions. Others had slowed, uncertain, scanning the trees as if a shifting labyrinth blocked their way. The Omega swallowed her panic. She told herself that the illusions wanted to feed on confusion and fear. She had to remain calm, focused on the faint sense of direction that tugged at her mind. As she pressed on, the forest seemed to warp. She caught glimpses of phantom figures flickering between trunks, or odd shapes appearing and vanishing in the corner of her eye. After a while, she realized she was running in circles, passing the same gnarled oak tree multiple times. Her breathing grew ragged as desperation rose inside her. If she could not even find the hidden post, how would she retrieve the pendant? She froze, closing her eyes and inhaling deeply. She tried to summon that same guiding feeling she'd had at the bonfire, the presence of the moon goddess that had driven her to toss her flower into the flames. In the hush of her mind, she sensed a faint pulse. It did not come from her heartbeat, nor from the illusions. It was more like a soft whisper encouraging her forward. Without questioning it further, she opened her eyes and started walking in a different direction, ignoring the illusions that made the trees appear to bend and shift. She stepped carefully, following that internal nudge. After a few minutes, she pushed through a dense wall of undergrowth and nearly tumbled into a small clearing. In the center stood a half-buried wooden post. A single silver pendant hung from a hook, glinting in the scattered sunlight. Relief flooded her, followed quickly by astonishment. She had found the hidden post. She didn't know if she was among the first to locate it or the last, but at least she had succeeded in uncovering it. Heart thumping, she approached, unhooked the pendant, and cradled it in her palm. The object was fashioned in the shape of a crescent moon, simple but beautiful. She spun around, searching for a path back to the field. Again, illusions swirled. The forest seemed determined to keep her trapped in confusion. Remembering how she found the post, she closed her eyes again, willing the same sense of guidance to surface. When she proceeded with slow determination, the illusions gradually gave way. She found a faint footpath leading out of the area. Each step felt like moving through thick fog, but she pressed on, eventually spotting the break in the trees that signaled she was close to the open fields. When she finally emerged from the forest, she was gasping for breath, sweat running down her temples. She clutched the silver pendant so tightly that the edges dug into her skin. As she stumbled into the clearing, a group of onlookers turned her way, stunned. A few other participants had already arrived, including Regina. The tall warrior looked somewhat bruised and scratched but held her pendant triumphantly. Clearly, she had been the first, or among the first, to return. Another couple of she-wolves also stood proudly, pendants in hand. Yet more participants still lingered in the forest. A pair of elders came forward, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and approval. They gestured for the Omega to hand over her pendant as proof she had completed the trial. Slowly, she extended her trembling hand, opening her palm. The elder's assistant took the pendant, examining it closely. After a tense moment, he nodded. "It is genuine. You have passed the first test." The Omega couldn't decide if she was more shocked or relieved. She bowed her head, trying to hide the tears that sprang to her eyes. In that moment, she realized that no matter how impossible everyone considered her presence in the trials, something beyond logic had guided her. She had no illusions about the difficulties ahead, but a new spark of hope flared in her chest. Regina shot the Omega a contemptuous glance, clearly displeased that an Omega had succeeded in retrieving a pendant. The taller woman muttered something under her breath and walked away, evidently refusing to acknowledge the possibility that the Omega might be a genuine contender. "Congratulations," murmured one of the passing female wolves who had also succeeded. She looked less arrogant than the others, giving a slight nod before moving on to speak with the elders. The Omega clasped her hands together, heart drumming with a mixture of terror and excitement. Her body ached. Bruises had formed on her arms from tangling with rough branches, and her lungs still burned from running. The elders announced that the first trial was complete once the final participants returned, or failed to return. Nearly half of them were either lost too long in the illusions or withdrew in defeat, thus eliminated. When the exhausted group was finally dismissed, the Omega staggered toward the sidelines, only to find her path blocked by a commanding figure, Alpha Alaric. He stood quietly, eyes fixed on her. His presence, so near, felt like a sudden eclipse of everything else. She froze, pulse hammering. After a taut moment, he spoke in a low voice. "You, the Omega, found your way through illusions that bested many of higher rank. Did you have help?" She shook her head quickly. "I only relied on my instincts, Alpha." He studied her with an unreadable gaze. She could see the weight of loss in his eyes, see the tension in the line of his jaw. Part of her wanted to comfort him, but she knew that would be wildly inappropriate. "Instinct," he repeated, as if testing the word. "Then let it continue guiding you if you insist on participating in these trials." There was no warmth in his tone, only a resigned acceptance. He turned to leave, but after a step, he glanced back at her. "Tell me your name." Her throat felt tight. Omegas seldom had cause to speak directly with the Alpha, let alone share their personal names. She uttered it softly, and he inclined his head, committing it to memory before walking away. She watched him go, feeling an odd twist in her chest. He hadn't offered her support or condemnation, only a stark, guarded acknowledgement. Even so, it was more than she ever expected to receive from him. She stood there, noticing how the crowd parted in deference to the Alpha's authority. Warriors straightened their backs, younger wolves whispered in awe. Alaric's expression remained distant, as if he carried the entire pack's burdens in a fortress around his heart. For the remainder of that day, the Omega wandered the pack's grounds in a haze of conflicting emotions. She had survived the first trial. She should have been elated, but the knowledge that far more treacherous tasks lay ahead weighed upon her. Moreover, the scornful looks and hushed insults she received from many pack members reminded her that few would celebrate her achievements. An Omega as a potential Luna was a scandalous concept, one that threatened the established hierarchy. At dusk, she returned to the Omega dormitory, only to find her companions already aware of her success. Some stared in wonder, others in envy, and a few in fear. One Omega approached her hesitantly. If you become Luna," she stammered, "does that mean you'll treat us better?" There was a desperate hope in her eyes. The question rattled the Omega, because it forced her to imagine an outcome she still found impossible. I don't know," she whispered honestly. "But if I have any say in it, I would never forget what it was like to be one of us." She gently touched the other Omega's shoulder, offering a fleeting moment of warmth. That night, she dreamed of moonlight falling on a quiet lake. In the dream, she stood at the water's edge, seeing her own reflection ripple. Then the image shifted, and she caught a glimpse of a wolf's face, a strong, regal creature with golden eyes. The wolf's gaze locked onto hers before fading into the moon's reflection. She awoke with a gasp, an inexplicable surge of determination blazing inside her. Far away, in the Alpha's private quarters, Alaric lay awake, haunted by memories of his former mate. He tried to convince himself that he would never accept another. But the pack's traditions demanded a Luna, and if the moon goddess had a plan, who was he to stand in its way? Still, the notion that an Omega had passed the first trial occupied his thoughts more than he cared to admit. It was an uneasy disruption to his grief, stirring something inside him he wasn't ready to face. Below that same moon, the seeds of change had been planted. The trials had only just begun, but already the pack felt the tremors of destiny shifting under their feet. The second trial was announced only 2 days after the first. Whispers swept through the corridors like a gathering storm. This time, the elders informed the pack that the challenge would test a candidate's emotional fortitude. The participants would be locked inside the old catacombs beneath the main estate for a set duration. There, in near darkness, they would confront illusions drawn from their deepest fears and regrets. The only way to exit before time ran out would be to solve the cryptic instructions left on the catacomb walls. When the Omega learned of this test, she felt a wave of terror. She had barely recovered from the physical ordeal in the forest, and now they were supposed to face illusions more powerful than anything an ordinary mind could handle. Many had been driven half-mad by these catacomb visions in past trials. The pack's lore was filled with cautionary tales of wolves who emerged screaming, unable to break free from the illusions that preyed on their minds. On the morning of the trial, the Omega joined the other remaining contestants outside the old stone entrance to the catacombs. Fog hung in the cold air, mingling with the scent of earth and decay that seeped from below. Elders and guards stood nearby, observing with stern composure. A few watchers from the pack huddled at a safe distance, curious but cautious about approaching the domain of old spirits. Regina, the tall warrior with the piercing gaze, stood off to one side, arms folded. She looked unflinching, as if determined to crush any fear. Another participant, a cunning she-wolf named Moria, fiddled with a small pendant around her neck and seemed more nervous, though she tried to hide it. The Omega hovered near the edge, doing her best not to draw attention. Then Elder addressed them. In these depths, illusions will feed on your nightmares, your doubts, your guilt. You must remain anchored in your truth and trust the wisdom of the moon goddess. Scattered along the passage are clues. Collecting and deciphering them will lead you to the exit. Those who fail to emerge within the allotted time, he paused, letting the words weigh heavily, will be removed from the trials. We cannot allow the pack's future Luna to be paralyzed by illusions. He directed them forward. One by one, they filed inside the narrow stairwell, descending into the gloom. The stone steps were worn by centuries of use, and the air grew colder and damper the deeper they went. Torches cast flickering light, revealing arched ceilings that led down branching corridors. Once all the participants had stepped inside, a guard pulled the heavy iron door shut behind them. The clang reverberated ominously through the darkness. The Omega's breath came quick. She tried to steady herself, remembering the forest illusions. This was entirely different, though. The catacombs were rumored to be filled with echoes of the pack's ancestors, their unquiet spirits lingering in the gloom. She moved forward, feeling the rough stone walls for guidance. Soon, the corridor widened, revealing a central chamber with multiple paths leading off like spokes on a wheel. The other contestants quickly chose routes, some splitting off in pairs, others going alone. Regina took one of the shadowy passages without hesitation, her posture radiating unshaken confidence. The Omega lingered, uncertain which direction to go, until a swirl of faint whispering breezed past her ears. She froze, straining to catch words in that ghostly murmur, but it drifted away. Shuddering, she forced herself into a corridor that sloped downward. The only illumination came from sporadic torches set into sconces. The flicker of flames distorted the space, conjuring shapes that twisted and melted at the edges of her vision. She tried not to dwell on them, but every step made the corridor feel narrower and more oppressive. Eventually, she came to a wall etched with symbols. They resembled the ancient runes the pack used for ceremonial inscriptions. She ran her fingers over the carvings, searching for a clue. A few lines of text were in the old language, a script she couldn't fully understand. But she recalled a few common words from the library: truth, reflection, sacrifice. Beneath the text, an arrow pointed to the left, suggesting that she follow that route to continue. She marked the direction mentally and pressed onward. No sooner had she taken a few steps when a soft voice echoed behind her. "You do not belong here." She spun around, the hair on her arm standing on end. She saw no one. But the voice persisted. "You are an Omega, worthless. Why do you torment yourself with impossible dreams?" It was as though the gloom itself had found a tongue. She tried to steady her breathing, forcing herself to remember that illusions would capitalize on her insecurities. She shook her head, continuing forward. But the voice trailed her, mocking her every step. "They are laughing at you. Even if you pass all these trials, the Alpha's heart is stone. The pack will never accept an Omega as their Luna." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to break. She pressed deeper, reaching another stone panel. This one bore a riddle scrawled in chalk. "When the past weighs heavy, only acceptance can unchain the future." It was cryptic, but maybe it was part of the clue she needed. Trying to interpret the words, she whispered them aloud. "Only acceptance can unchain the future." Could this be pointing her to find a literal chain somewhere? Or perhaps it referred to letting go of guilt or fear. Turning the corner, she discovered a small chamber with a musty aroma. Its walls displayed murals of wolves standing beneath a full moon. In the center of the room, a large chain coiled on the floor, its links made of black iron. Next to it, a statue of an ancient Luna figure held a stone key in her outstretched hand. It seemed to be an invitation to do something with the chain and the key. But as she stepped toward the statue, the illusions intensified. Shadows peeled off the walls, swirling around her. They formed half-recognizable faces, wolves she used to serve in the pack, all sneering at her. She froze, horror striking her chest. The shadows hissed. "You dare to seek the lunar role? You cannot even defend yourself. You will fail this test and be cast out." Her fear soared, body trembling. She sank to her knees, pressing her palms to her ears, trying to block out the voices. They only grew louder, chanting taunts that hammered at her confidence. She shut her eyes, panting, tears leaking down her cheeks. For several agonizing moments, she truly believed she would be stuck here, paralyzed by illusions. Then, a different memory flickered in her mind. She recalled the forest trial, how she had closed her eyes and listened to a deeper guidance. Beyond fear, beyond sorrow, she had found a whisper of the goddess's presence. With desperate resolve, she reached for that quiet inner compass again. She slowed her breathing, focusing on the faint hope that had guided her before. Gradually, the illusion's voices dimmed to a low hiss. She opened her eyes, fixating on the statue and the chain. The riddle's words returned. When the past weighs heavy, only acceptance can unchain the future. The chain, with its black iron links, might symbolize her burdens, her doubts about being an Omega, her shame at constantly being overlooked. Perhaps she needed to face those feelings, accept her origins, and see them not as a limitation, but as a starting point. She crawled to the chain, lifting it with trembling hands. Each link felt cold and heavy, as if it embodied the scorn and judgment she had internalized all her life. Her voice came out in a hoarse whisper. I accept who I am. I embrace my past, no matter how lowly it seems. My worth is not decided by my rank alone. With those words, she slipped the chain into the statue's open arms, using the stone key to lock it in place. It was an act of release, symbolically offering the burdens of her past to the goddess's mercy. A gust of wind whirled through the chamber, extinguishing the torch at the entrance. She gasped, momentarily plunged into darkness. But a soft glow began emanating from the statue itself. She watched in astonishment as a hidden mechanism clicked, revealing a narrow passage behind the mural. Whether it was magic or an ancient contraption, it felt like a portal to the next step. She forced herself forward, leaving the swirling illusions behind. The tight passage eventually spat her out into another corridor. Her body trembled from the emotional toll, but she kept going. Minutes later, she heard the faint sound of a distant argument. Could it be other contestants encountering illusions? Cautiously, she approached a side chamber to find Moria pressed against a wall, eyes wide, speaking to no one visible. Please stop, Moria whimpered, apparently beset by illusions. She clutched a piece of paper so tightly her knuckles were white. The Omega hesitated. She could simply ignore Moria and press on. Competition demanded ruthless focus, but her conscience tugged at her. As an Omega, she knew what it felt like to be cast aside. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped closer and spoke softly. Moria, look at me. It is not real. The illusions are feeding on your fear. Moria's eyes flickered, half seeing the Omega. I can't. I keep hearing my mother's voice, telling me I can't do anything right, that I will fail just like she did. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Gently, the Omega placed her hands on Moria's shoulders. What do you truly believe about yourself? Does your mother define you, or can you write your own story? Her tone was gentle, but urgent. For a moment, Moria trembled. Then her face contorted into an expression of conflict. Finally, she inhaled shakily. She nodded once, fighting the illusions with a new resolve. You might be right, she whispered. I have to move forward. The shadows around her receded slightly, allowing Moria to breathe. Realizing the Omega had come to her aid, Moria managed a tiny, grateful smile. Thank you. Let's see if we can find the exit. They pressed on together, scanning the walls for more cryptic messages or hidden levers. The illusions still flickered at the periphery, but the Omega found her confidence had grown. Helping Moria reminded her that compassion could be a source of strength, not a weakness. Perhaps that, too, was part of what the goddess demanded in a future Luna, empathy for those in need. Eventually, they stumbled upon a series of runic carvings that repeated the phrase, Keys of Truth, Door of Destiny. They realized they needed to gather small medallion-like keys from different corners of the catacombs to unlock the final door leading outside. By that point, the illusions were less intense, as if they had tested the contestants' breaking points and begun to subside. Moria and the Omega searched the corridors until they located a small alcove containing an ancient chest. Inside lay 2 medallion keys, each etched with a crescent moon symbol. With those keys in hand, They retraced their steps to a large, bolted door near a spiral staircase. Other contestants had already arrived there, among them Regina, who glared at the Omega and Moria. Regina was holding her own medallion key and tapping her foot impatiently. "I found only one key. We need at least 2 more to open the door. So unless you have them, we are all stuck." She shot the Omega a pointed look, evidently still furious that an Omega had made it this far. Moria raised her chin defiantly, holding up the 2 keys they had found. Regina's eyes flicked with relief, though she tried to mask it. Another she-wolf, who had found the 4th key, hurried over. Together, they inserted their keys into the ornate locks. With a grating sound, the door unlocked. A creak of old wood signaled it was ready to open. One by one, they climbed the spiral staircase that emerged into a small courtyard behind the main estate. Fresh air washed over them. Elders waited at the exit, torches in hand, a mixture of anticipation and concern on their faces. One of them nodded respectfully. "You have completed the 2nd trial. Your minds had been tested, and illusions have attempted to break you, but you prevailed." A subdued cheer rose from the pack members who had been allowed to gather there. The Omega emerged blinking, her face pale but resolute. She had passed the 2nd trial, against all odds, again. Her gaze flicked to the side, where Alpha Alaric stood, arms crossed. His expression was guarded, his eyes revealing only a hint of acknowledgement. If he felt any admiration for her perseverance, he hid it carefully. Regina stepped forward, ignoring the Omega, and addressed the elders. "How many are left?" She sounded both impatient and eager to determine her ranking. An elder consulted a list. 7 of you have returned. Of the original 20 or so who began, half have withdrawn or did not solve the illusions in time. We will verify the catacombs are empty soon, but it appears that only 7 remain to compete for the Luna title. A hush followed as everyone realized how quickly the trials had whittled down the candidates. Regina gave a curt nod. Moria exhaled softly, relief shading her features. The Omega tried to catch her breath and process the reality that she was now among the final 7. Shock coursed through her, mixed with a deepening sense of responsibility. If the goddess truly wanted her in this, she had to keep proving herself. Word of the Omega's success in the catacombs spread through the pack like wildfire. Some called it a fluke or credited Moria for guiding her. Others whispered that the Omega must have discovered secret knowledge or perhaps was favored by an ancient spirit. Suspicion and jealousy blossomed among certain ranks. How could an Omega survive illusions that tore down more experienced warriors? In the following days, as the pack awaited the next trial's announcement, the Omega found herself the subject of harsh gossip. If she dared to walk through the main courtyard, conversations fell silent, eyes tracked her every move, and scornful whispers followed. She tried to keep her head up and focus on chores, but the hostility weighed on her spirit. On several occasions, she overheard someone hissing, "She will fail next time. She is only lucky so far." Amid this tense atmosphere, she also noticed Moria offering small gestures of support, like a friendly nod or a brief word of encouragement. Their shared ordeal in the catacombs had forged a bond of mutual respect, though they hardly considered themselves friends yet. Moria had her own ambitions, but it seemed she was not as cruel or dismissive as some of the others. A few days after the catacombs, the Omega was scrubbing floors in the main estate's western corridor when she sensed a presence behind her. She looked up to see Beta Natalia again, her gaze cool and assessing. "I hear you have succeeded twice," Natalia said quietly. The Omega lowered her brush and stood, wiping her hands on a rag. "Yes, Beta." Natalia studied her for a moment. Alpha Alaric has rarely spoken since these trials began, but I have noticed him watching you. He might not show it publicly, but something about your perseverance catches his interest." The Omega felt her face grow warm. She had no idea what to say to that, especially since the Alpha's gaze had remained distant whenever she glanced his way. "He only acknowledges the results of the trials, I think," she murmured. Natalia tilted her head slightly. "We shall see. Be careful. Many in the pack do not want an Omega to come close to that seat of power. Some might choose less honorable methods to discourage you from winning." She paused, then turned to walk away, her voice echoing back. "And do not forget that the Alpha himself may not desire a new mate, no matter who passes these trials. His heart is still grieving." Stunned, the Omega stood there, brush in hand, as Natalia's footsteps faded down the corridor. She felt a shiver of unease. The Beta had implied that she should watch her back. Indeed, it wasn't uncommon for sabotage or cruelty to arise during these trials, especially when rank and power were at stake. That evening, as the Omega prepared for bed, she mulled over everything Natalia said. She couldn't deny that the hostility in the pack seemed to grow bolder each day. She recalled the mocking stares and overheard threats. Even Ingrid, who used to bully her over chores, now glared with added venom in her eyes, as if the Omega's potential rise threatened her stability in the hierarchy. For a moment, the Omega felt paralyzed by doubt. Perhaps it would be best to withdraw from the trials before the next test claimed her life or her sanity. But as she lay down on her thin mattress, she remembered how she had come this far. The subtle quake of the earth at the bonfire, the illusions she conquered. If she gave up now, that would be an insult to the goddess's guidance. So she clutched her blanket, determined to continue, no matter what threats or scorn she faced. She would endure, not only to survive, but to show that an Omega could be strong enough to earn the pack's respect. Her eyelids grew heavy, and sleep claimed her with slow inevitability. Miles away, in the Alpha's private room, Alaric stood by the window, arms folded across his broad chest. His gaze swept over the moonlit horizon. Inside, his heart was heavy with memories. He seldom allowed himself to think of the mate he lost, but these trials forced him to confront the question of a new Luna. The elders insisted it was a necessity for the pack, yet his soul rebelled. Still, he recalled the Omega who had passed 2 trials against all expectations. Something about her quiet resolve, the faint glow in her eyes when challenged, gnawed at his defenses. He tried to dismiss it, reminding himself that no one could replace the love he lost. Yet a whisper in the night air warned him that the moon goddess was weaving a new tapestry, and ignoring her design might tear the pack apart. He clenched his jaw, fighting the storm of conflicting emotions within. The next dawn arrived with a solemn hush. No official announcement of the 3rd trial had been made yet, leaving everyone in suspense. The Omega awoke with an uneasy feeling, as though the day carried unspoken tension. She went about her chores quietly, trying to avoid confrontations. If it weren't for the trials, she would have continued life as a near-invisible presence. But now, she drew more attention, wanted or not. After midday, a messenger hurried through the pack's grounds, summoning the remaining Luna candidates to the Great Hall. The Omega quickly washed her hands and joined the small group of 7 that formed near the main doors. She recognized Regina, Moria, and 4 other contenders, each wearing serious expressions. The rest of the pack watched from the periphery, curiosity plain in their eyes. At the front of the hall stood 3 elders. One of them stepped forward, clearing his throat. "You have overcome challenges of the body and the mind. Now, Your loyalty and capacity to protect the pack from threats both internal and external will be tested. The next trial will be announced soon, but preparations are required. In the meantime, the Alpha has requested that all of you attend a formal dinner tonight to observe your conduct and discuss the pack's well-being. This dinner is mandatory for each contestant. The Omega's eyes widened. A formal dinner? She owned no suitable clothes and had never attended a high-ranking event in her life. She was more accustomed to serving at such events, not dining. Regina's lips curled into a smirk. Moria blinked in surprise, then swallowed hard. The rest exchanged glances. It seemed none expected to be tested on social grace, yet that too was a critical component of a Luna's role. The elder concluded, "Prepare yourselves. The dinner will commence at dusk. Dismissed." As the group dispersed, Regina caught the Omega's eye. "Try not to spill the soup," she mocked. "Or perhaps you should volunteer to serve it. That might be more comfortable for you." The Omega bit back a retort, refusing to let Regina's insult rattle her too deeply. If the dinner was part of the trial, she would face it with as much dignity as she could muster. By late afternoon, word of the formal dinner spread throughout the estate. In an act of unexpected kindness, Moria approached the Omega in the corridor, holding a folded gown of simple but elegant fabric. "I borrowed this from a friend who is about your size," she offered, cheeks slightly flushed. "You cannot attend the dinner in your work clothes." The Omega hesitated, gratitude welling up inside. She had never worn anything so fine. "Thank you," she whispered. I do not know how to repay you." Moria waved it off. "Think nothing of it. We might be rivals in this trial, but that doesn't mean we have to be enemies. Besides, if you walk in wearing rags, the rest will only mock you. And I cannot stand Regina's smug face another moment." Touched, the Omega carefully accepted the gown. It was made of a soft, dark green material, the neckline modest but flattering. She smiled at Moria, realizing that some in this competition retained a sense of empathy. "Truly, thank you." That evening, she dressed in the small Omega dormitory, ignoring the startled looks from her peers. The gown fit well enough, though she felt conspicuously out of place. She tugged nervously at the fabric, took a deep breath, and headed for the grand dining hall. The corridors buzzed with activity as pack members scurried to finalize decorations or set the table for the high-ranked feast. At the hall's entrance, a guard asked for her name. Normally, she would have slipped in unseen to serve. Now, she was an invited guest. She stepped inside, scanning the lavish setting. Long, polished tables were adorned with fresh floral arrangements and gleaming tableware. Candlelight flickered, casting warm glows across ornate tapestries depicting the pack's lineage. One by one, the Luna candidates arrived in refined outfits, greeted by respectful nods from the Beta and elders. Finally, Alpha Alaric entered, wearing a tailored black suit that emphasized his powerful build. His face remained solemn, yet the atmosphere tensed with the weight of his authority. He took a seat at the head of the table, motioning for the others to join. The Omega found herself seated near the far end, close enough to see him but not near enough to converse easily. Regina and Moria sat further up, while the other 4 contenders spread around. The table was also lined with various pack leaders, all eyeing the candidates with careful scrutiny. Dinner commenced with a series of toasts. The Beta welcomed everyone, praising the tradition of the Luna trials and the resilience of those who competed. Course after course arrived, servers carrying platters laden with savory dishes. The Omega tried to mimic the etiquette of those around her, watching how they used utensils and sipped their wine. She felt awkward but managed to hide it behind a calm expression. At some point, conversation shifted to matters of pack security. An elder cleared his throat, addressing the group at large. With the presence of rogues near our borders, it is crucial that the future Luna be prepared to manage not only internal unity, but also threats from without. Regina seized the moment to describe her experience dealing with rogue scouts. I have personally led patrols, she boasted, lifting her chin. I know how to take down intruders. She cast a glance around the table, lingering on the Omega. It takes strength to protect this pack. Pure strength. Another contender chimed in about her knowledge of alliance treaties with neighboring packs. Each seemed determined to prove her worth. After a while, an elder turned pointedly to the Omega. You, child, have been unusually quiet. What perspective would you bring to pack security if you were to become Luna? A hush fell around the table. Curious eyes locked onto her. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She set down her fork gently, summoning courage to speak. I have no experience with battle or negotiations. That is true. But if I have learned anything from my time as an Omega, it is how to observe and understand the daily struggles of all pack members. Sometimes threats come not just from the outside, but from within. If we cannot maintain unity among ourselves, rogues might slip through our cracks. I believe bridging gaps in communication and caring for our weaker members can strengthen the entire pack's defense. She feared she might have said too much or sounded naive. For a long moment, no one responded. Then, surprisingly, an elder gave a small nod. A fair point, he acknowledged. Regina rolled her eyes, but a few others seemed to consider the Omega's words thoughtfully. Allard did not speak, though his gaze flicked to the Omega, dark eyes unreadable. She felt her cheeks warm, uncertain if he found her statement foolish or insightful. The rest of the meal proceeded with discussions about trade, alliances, and pack structures. The Omega listened closely, realizing how little she knew of political intricacies. Still, her inner voice insisted that compassion and empathy were vital traits a true Luna needed. After dinner, the group transitioned to a more informal setting, gathering near a grand fireplace where plush seats formed a semicircle. Alaric settled in a large armchair, while the Beta, Elders, and the Luna candidates arranged themselves around. Soft music played from a distant corner, courtesy of a lone violinist. Speak freely, the Beta invited, glancing at the candidates. If there is any insight or question you have regarding the pack's direction, do not hesitate to voice it. Moria cleared her throat and inquired about the pack's economic strategies, particularly how they supported families with limited resources. Another candidate raised concerns about the old rumor of an impending famine. Regina offered her take on forging stronger alliances with neighboring packs to prepare for potential conflict. Eventually, Alaric stirred, resting his elbows on the armrests. He fixed his gaze on the Omega. Her heart pounded, feeling singled out. In a low tone, he asked, "You have endured 2 trials, each testing your will. If you truly believe the goddess has chosen you, what do you think sets you apart?" A flush crept up her neck. She clasped her hands in her lap, trying to hide their trembling. I do not claim to know the goddess's mind, Alpha, she began softly, voice quivering. But I think that being overlooked for so long has taught me to find strength in unexpected places. Maybe a Luna's power does not always come from rank or skill, but from resilience and the ability to empathize with Cry. Every member of the pack. Her answer sounded raw, yet she couldn't lie. She dared to meet Alaric's eyes. For a moment, she glimpsed a flicker of emotion behind his stoic facade, something she interpreted as reluctant respect. But it vanished almost immediately. He merely inclined his head and turned his focus to another question from an elder. Still, the Omega's entire being buzzed with the recognition that he had given her a moment of his undivided attention. The conversation continued around the fire, but she remained keenly aware of his presence, the way his posture grew rigid whenever anyone mentioned loyalty or mating bonds. She sensed how deeply he missed his deceased mate, how the memories might be both precious and painful. Though she knew she had no right to approach him with comfort, her heart ached for the sorrow he carried. When the gathering finally ended, the beta dismissed everyone, reminding them that the next trial could be announced at any time. The Omega stood, smoothing the borrowed gown. She felt the stares again, some brimming with disdain, others with grudging curiosity. As she made her way to the exit, Regina brushed past, her voice a condescending whisper. "Enjoy your moment of pretense, Omega. The next trial will weed out the weak." The Omega ignored the barb, refusing to let Regina's words mar her fragile sense of hope. She had spoken her truth tonight, stood her ground in unfamiliar territory. That alone was a victory in her eyes. But that night, she discovered how real Natalia's warning had been. While returning to the Omega dormitory, she took a side corridor to avoid the crowds leaving the main hall. The passage was dimly lit, the torches spaced far apart. She heard footsteps behind her, multiple sets. Instinct made her quicken her pace, but it was too late. 3 figures stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path. She recognized Ingrid at the center, smirking with malicious glee. The 2 others were lower-ranked wolves who often thrived on bullying those beneath them. The corridor was deserted. No help would come from outside. "Well, well," Ingrid hissed, crossing her arms. "Look who decided to pretend she's important. An Omega prancing around in fancy clothes, acting like a real contender. Don't you realize what a joke that is?" The Omega's heart pounded. She scanned for an escape, but the trio formed a menacing semicircle. Ingrid took a step closer, eyes gleaming with spite. "Do you really think you can become Luna? You don't deserve that role. You can't even fight back, can you?" Her lackeys snickered. One snatched at the skirt of the borrowed gown, tugging sharply. The Omega stepped back, her voice trembling. "Let me pass." Ingrid ignored the plea. "Maybe we should show you your place," she sneered. "A few bruises might remind you not to rise above your station." She clenched a fist, stepping forward. Panic flared. The Omega had never been adept at fighting. She prepared to dodge, but Ingrid lunged, aiming a blow at her shoulder. Pain exploded as Ingrid's knuckles struck bone. The Omega staggered, biting back a cry. Instantly, one of Ingrid's companions grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. She gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Fueled by rage and jealousy, Ingrid spat. "You dare take up the goddess's trials and embarrass the rest of us. You think the Alpha wants a pathetic creature like you by his side?" She raised a hand, about to strike again. Suddenly, a sharp voice echoed down the corridor. "Stop!" The word cracked through the air. Ingrid froze mid-blow, startled. The Omega, still pinned, turned her head to see who had intervened. Standing at the corridor's entrance was Beta Natalia, her eyes flashing. She advanced swiftly, projecting authority. Ingrid and her cronies immediately released the Omega, stepping back in alarm. Natalia's fury was palpable. "What in the goddess's name do you think you are doing?" she demanded. You dare assault a candidate in the Luna trials? Ingrid's face went pale, fear replacing her earlier malice. WWE were just... Natalia didn't let her finish. I will not tolerate such treachery, she hissed. We need every candidate tested fairly. Attacking them in secret is dishonorable and punishable by the Alpha's law. She flicked her gaze at Ingrid's accomplices. Get out of my sight before I drag you to the dungeons myself. The bullies scattered, practically tripping over themselves to flee. Ingrid shot the Omega one final glare before disappearing into the shadows. Natalia turned to the Omega, her expression softening slightly. Are you hurt? She asked. The Omega gingerly rotated her shoulder, wincing. I will be fine, she said, voice shaky. Thank you, Beta. Natalia's features hardened again, her anger not directed at the Omega, but at those who tried to harm her. This is what I warned you about. Some in the pack believe your participation is a threat to the established order. They may attempt to sabotage you. The Omega offered a weak nod. I won't stop. The goddess led me here for a reason. Natalia studied her, then placed a firm hand on the Omega's uninjured shoulder. Good. You must keep your guard up. There is more at play in these trials than meets the eye. I will report this incident, though I doubt Ingrid will be foolish enough to try again, now that we know her intentions. The Omega's eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude and lingering pain. She murmured her thanks and watched as Natalia left to inform the Beta guards. Alone in the corridor once more, she felt her arm throb. Ingrid's words still pounded in her ears. You think the Alpha wants a pathetic creature like you by his side? She pressed a hand to her shoulder, drawing strength from her resolve. She would not be bowed by cruelty. Even if the entire pack scorned her, she refused to abandon the sense of purpose that had begun to bloom in her heart. With unsteady steps, she made her way back to the dormitory, resolved to endure whatever lay ahead. The following morning brought a wave of rumors about a scuffle in the corridors. Some whispered that the Omega had provoked Ingrid, others that Ingrid had nearly disqualified herself by attacking a candidate. No official statement was issued, but Ingrid's face bore a tense expression whenever she crossed the Omega's path. She did not attempt another confrontation, likely wary of the Beta's wrath. Word soon arrived that the third trial would commence in 2 days. No details were shared, only that the pack would gather at dawn near the old watchtower on the far western edge of their territory. Anxiety rippled through the candidates. The watchtower was rumored to be near the borderlands, where rogues occasionally prowled. Could the third trial involve direct confrontation with outside threats? The Omega steeled herself for what was to come. She found a quiet corner behind the kitchens the night before, gazing at the moon above. The pale orb shone across the rooftops, tranquil and silent. Holding her breath, she whispered a tiny prayer, asking for courage and guidance. The breeze carried the faintest answer, a gentle hush, but stirred her hair. In that moment, she felt an echo of that quake in her soul, the same quake she had sensed at the bonfire. It reminded her that she was no longer just an Omega quietly serving in the background. Whatever challenge awaited at the watchtower, she vowed to face it. Perhaps the trials would break her. Perhaps the entire pack would laugh at her downfall. But she would not back down. The moon goddess had placed her on this path, and she would follow it to the end, come what may. 2 days later, dawn broke across the western edge of the territory with a cool hush. Pale sunlight crept over the rolling hills, illuminating a solitary watchtower silhouetted against the sky. This tower had stood for decades, ever vigilant, serving as the first line of defense against rogue attacks. Now, It would host the third trial of the Luna candidates. The Omega arrived early, heart pounding with anticipation. A restless night of anxiety had kept her awake, but her determination remained unshaken. She stood in the dewy grass, dressed in simple leggings and a tunic, both of which she had sewn and patched many times over. On her feet, she wore battered boots that gave just enough protection against the uneven terrain. The morning air was crisp, and she could almost taste the tension gathering as the other 6 contestants gathered nearby. Regina stood at the head of the group, arms folded, her stance exuding confidence. Her gaze flicked over to the Omega and lingered briefly, full of cold dismissal. Moria offered a small nod of acknowledgement, though her face looked pinched with nerves. The other 4 candidates, 2 tall warrior-class she-wolves and 2 from noble family lines, whispered among themselves, trying to guess what was about to unfold. A narrow dirt path wound from the watchtower down to a broad clearing, and that clearing was where the elders waited with a contingent of guards. The beta, Natalia, was among them, her expression solemn. Alpha Alaric stood slightly apart, arms behind his back, his posture radiating controlled authority. He was dressed in dark, functional garments that suggested readiness for potential danger. The Omega found her gaze drifting to him. She recalled his solemn expression at the dinner and the glimmer of interest that flickered in his eyes whenever she spoke her mind. Yet he still carried that shroud of sorrow, a carefully guarded fortress around his heart. An elder motioned the contestants forward. "Gather and listen," he said, in a clear voice. "This third trial will measure your capacity to protect, adapt, and lead during a real threat. As many of you know, rogue activity has increased near our western border. The watchtower is vital to our defense. Today, you will work in teams to resolve a simulated crisis, reflecting the kind of problems a Luna may face. Then, you will face the real threat that lurks in these lands." A subdued murmur spread among the candidates. A trial that involved genuine danger would be a stark contrast to illusions and labyrinths. Some glanced at each other, wondering how lethal this test might be. The Omega felt a chill run through her, recalling the stories about rogue wolves roaming the region, scavenging, and attacking lone travelers. The elder cleared his throat, continuing, "First, you will be divided into 2 teams. Each team must travel to a marked location near the border, where a distress call scenario awaits you. You must coordinate, protect pack property, and bring any survivors or supplies back here safely. Hidden watchers will observe your every move, judging your cooperation, strategy, and valor. The second part of the trial will depend on what you face out there." He raised a hand to quiet the whispers. "Remember, these trials are meant to reveal not only strength and cleverness, but also compassion for your comrades and unwavering loyalty to the pack. A Luna must know how to lead under extreme pressure." Alaric stepped forward, gazing at the candidates with the weight of authority. "If you encounter genuine rogues," he said in a calm tone, "focus on defending yourselves. The Watchers and I will intervene if the threat escalates. But do not expect an easy pass. We want to see how you handle Sepular. Real danger." His gaze darted momentarily to the Omega before sweeping over the entire group. Theta Natalia read a list from a parchment. Team 1 will include Regina, Moria, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a stately, dark-haired contender from a noble line. Regina and Moria both nodded, though Regina's eyes tightened slightly at being forced to share leadership. Team 2 will include the Omega, plus Aaron and Celeste, and Briar. Natalia continued, "You will set out to the southwestern quadrant, near the old orchard. Aaron and Celeste were both seasoned warrior trainees, and Briar was from a mid-ranked family, known for her skill in tracking. The Omega glanced at her teammates, apprehensive but relieved not to be stuck with Regina's open hostility. Natalia rolled up the parchment. You have until dusk to complete your objectives and return. Remember, the Watchers will record who among you demonstrates the qualities we seek in a Luna. With that, each team set off. Team 1 followed a path heading northwest. Team 2 moved toward the southwestern orchard, accompanied by the hush of rustling grass and the distant cry of crows. The Omega took a steadying breath, her mind racing as she trudged behind Aaron's broad form. Aaron tossed her a cursory glance. Stay close. We don't know what we'll find. It could just be a stage scenario, maybe missing supplies, or a wounded pack member faking an injury. He tried to sound confident, but the tension in his shoulders revealed he was also wary of genuine rogue attacks. Briar, who had a lean, agile build, checked the breeze. The orchard is about a mile from here. We should keep an ear out for anything unusual. Footsteps, snarls, or the scent of unknown wolves. Celeste, wearing a close-fitting outfit suitable for quick movements, tightened the straps on her vest. I'll keep watch on our flank. If the Watchers see us performing well, we might all pass this round. But let's be careful. Rogues are no joke. The Omega nodded, silently grateful that her teammates were not openly hostile. That said, she could sense an unspoken uncertainty about her. They might question whether an Omega, with little combat training, could be an asset. She vowed to stay alert and do her part, even if it meant relying on the empathy and intelligence she'd gained through years of observing pack life from the shadows. They walked in careful formation, crossing a wide meadow dotted with wildflowers and shrubs. The sun climbed higher, warming the land but doing little to soothe the group's anxiety. Eventually, they spotted a cluster of twisted apple trees up ahead. The old orchard, its branches tangled in thick, gnarled shapes. Wind hissed through the leaves, and overripe fruit littered the ground, giving off a faintly sweet yet decaying scent. Aaron gestured for them to slow down. This must be the location. Keep your eyes open. As they wove past the first row of apple trees, they stumbled upon scattered crates and overturned baskets. Some looked smashed, as if ransacked. The Omega's pulse quickened. The scene had the telltale signs of a skirmish, or at least a hurried escape. Celeste knelt by a broken crate, brushing her fingers across claw marks gouged into the wood. These marks are fresh, she murmured. Rogue wolves, most likely. The scenario might be more real than we expected. Suddenly, a faint cry echoed from deeper in the orchard. The group exchanged looks, then hurried toward the sound. They found a young pack messenger slumped against a tree, clutching her side where an ugly scratch seeped blood. She looked up at them, face ashen. Helpy bandits, they took supplies. I tried to resist. Briar immediately crouched beside the injured messenger, pressing a cloth to the wound. Stay still. We'll help you. The Omega, recalling her lessons in herbal remedies from older cooks and healers, knelt down and rummaged through the fallen baskets. Miraculously, she found a small pouch of medicinal herbs that had spilled from the wreckage. She recognized a few leaves that could help staunch bleeding. While she worked to pack the herbs against the wound, Aaron and Celeste fanned out, scanning the orchard for danger. We need to be prepared if they come back, Aaron muttered. Could be a group of rogues looting supplies. The messenger winced in pain. They ran off that way, she whispered, pointing to a thicket of brush on the orchard's far side. They might still be close. The Omega tied the makeshift bandage snugly. We'll get you out of here, she promised, glancing at Briar. But we have to ensure the area is safe first. Briar looked torn. If we leave her alone while we chase the rogues, she might be vulnerable. But if we bring her into danger, we put her at risk too. Aaron, edging closer, spoke in a low voice. We have to investigate. The Watchers will expect us to handle the threat. If we fail to secure the supplies, we fail the scenario. If it's just a scenario at all. Celeste nodded grimly. The Watchers are out there, seeing how we react. We should at least scout the area. We can't let rogues harass the orchard and our territory. The Omega felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew that the elders wanted to see how candidates might balance compassion and responsibility. Abandoning an injured pack member would look cruel, but ignoring a potential threat could endanger more lives. This was precisely the kind of crisis Aluna might confront, protecting the vulnerable while also tackling an immediate danger. Looking from the injured messenger to the group, she spoke up quietly. Perhaps one of us should stay here with the messenger, ensuring her safety. The others can attempt to drive away the rogues, or at least confirm they're gone. Aaron gave her a guarded look. You're the least trained in combat. Would you be safe going to chase the rogues? She stiffened at the unspoken doubt in his tone. Before she could reply, Celeste cleared her throat. I'll stay, she offered. I might not be a fully trained medic, but I know enough to keep her stable. Briar, Aaron, and our Omega friend can investigate the rogues. If it's too dangerous, we retreat, the Omega nearly protested, thinking she should remain and let Celeste, the stronger fighter, help drive off rogues. But she realized that might be an admission that she had nothing to contribute in a confrontation. She wanted to prove that she could handle risk, that she wouldn't cower behind those more capable. So, with a small nod, she agreed. We'll go check it out. We will be careful. Celeste helped the messenger lean against the tree trunk for more comfort, while Briar led the way toward the brush. The Omega followed, heart thudding with adrenaline, Aaron close behind. The orchard grew denser, the trees twisting overhead, branches forming a scraggly canopy that filtered the sunlight into strange patterns on the ground. Wind rustled the leaves, or was it footsteps? She strained her ears for any sign of hostile presence. They reached a tangle of shrubs, beyond which lay a narrow ravine littered with boulders. Briar crouched, pointing to footprints in the damp soil. There's more than one, at least 3 different sets of prints. They look fresh. Aaron nodded, scanning the terrain. Stay low. He turned to the Omega, voice subdued. Stick close, and if things get dangerous, let us handle the fight. Understood? She bristled slightly, but accepted his concern. Understood, she murmured. She knew she lacked their combat training, yet a flicker of pride refused to let her remain entirely passive. Slowly, they crept into the ravine. The air felt heavier here, as if nature itself sensed an oncoming confrontation. A rancid odor drifted through the breeze, the telltale scent of rogue wolves who lived beyond established territories. The Omega's skin prickled. She could almost feel hostile eyes on them. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from behind a cluster of boulders. 3 rogue wolves emerged, shoulders hunched and lips curled back in snarls. They were in human form, but their eyes gleamed with the wildness of those who had long abandoned pack law. Scraps of tattered clothing clung to their bodies, and they carried crude weapons, knives, clubs, and jagged spears. Briar immediately stepped forward, hand raised in a warning gesture. Leave this territory, she commanded. These lands belong to our pack. Surrender any stolen supplies, or we will take them back by force. One of the rogues, a lanky figure with a long scar down his cheek, spat in the dirt. "Who are you to demand anything?" he hissed. "We don't answer to the big shots of your pack. We take what we need to survive." Aaron, eyes narrowing, brandished his short sword. "We have the advantage. There are more of us than you think. Guards patrol this area. We are giving you one chance to leave peacefully." The rogue sneered. Another, a muscular female with matted hair, bared her teeth. "We have nothing left to lose," she said, voice dripping with bitterness. "If your pack wants a fight you'll get." Without further warning, she lunged, swinging a crude dagger at Briar's midsection. Briar dodged, swiping at her attacker's arm to disarm the blade. Meanwhile, the tall rogue with the scar launched himself at Aaron, their weapons clanging in the tight space. The third rogue, a wiry youth, circled, eyes darting. The Omega backed away, blood pounding in her ears. She had never been in a fight like this. The scene seemed to blur with chaotic movement. Briar and Aaron fought with skill, their motions honed from training. But the rogues were fueled by desperation, and that made them dangerous. The Omega scanned the confrontation, looking for anything she could do to help. She remembered that watchers would be observing how she reacted. Hiding in fear would confirm every doubt about her. But she also knew recklessness could get her or her teammates hurt. Briar pinned the muscular rogue to the ground, twisting her dagger away. Aaron parried blows from the tall rogue. The third rogue tried to slip behind Aaron, raising a sharpened stick that could easily slash an unprotected neck. The Omega saw the danger a heartbeat before it happened. Gritting her teeth, she lunged forward, seized a fallen branch from the ground, and thrust it at the wiry rogue's arm. It struck him just enough to ruin his aim, forcing him off balance. Aaron spun, catching the movement, and landed a swift blow that knocked the rogue flat. The Omega's breath came fast as adrenaline soared through her. She had acted on instinct, but it was enough to keep Aaron from a potential injury. That quick intervention left the third rogue dazed on the ground. Briar kept her opponent subdued, and Aaron had disarmed the tall one. Within moments, the group of rogues realized they were outmatched. Hissing in frustration, the tall one spat at the Omega. "You fight for your pack's scraps like obedient dogs," he growled, then jerked free from Aaron's hold and took off, weaving through the boulders. The others followed, scrambling away. Briar started to give chase, but Aaron grabbed her shoulder, cautioning, "They're fleeing. Let them go. We can secure the orchard, then inform the watchers. That's enough for now." Slowly, the group's tension ebbed as the rogues disappeared into the distance. Briar retrieved the stolen crate stashed behind a rock, a few food supplies, cloth, and tools likely meant for trade. The Omega's hands shook with the residual effects of fear. She glanced at Aaron, whose arm bore a shallow cut. "You're hurt," she said quietly, stepping closer to see. He shrugged, though his face was tight with pain. "Just a scratch, nothing serious. I can wrap it up once we get back to Celeste." Briar exhaled, scanning the ravine to ensure no threat remained. "We should move quickly. There might be more rogues. Let's gather everything and see if the messenger is all right." Together, they made their way back to the orchard. Celeste and the injured messenger were relieved to see them, though the messenger's eyes widened at the cuts and bruises. "You fought them off?" Aaron flexed his arm. "They took off running. We recovered most of the stolen goods." "How are you faring?" The messenger managed a faint smile. "Your friend here," she gestured at Celeste, "kept me stable. I can walk if you support me." The Omega helped bandage Aaron's arm, using the same herbs she'd applied to the messenger. Her hands trembled less now. She felt a strange sense of accomplishment. She had contributed to defending her group, albeit in a small way. Aaron nodded grudging thanks, perhaps surprised that her knowledge of remedies was worth something in a skirmish. With the supplies and the injured messenger in tow, they headed back toward the watchtower. The midday sun emerged fully, brightening the meadows, and a sense of relief warred with lingering apprehension. The watchers had to have seen the entire exchange, or at least glimpses of it. This third trial demanded that each candidate prove the ability to face real conflict. She had done her part, but she had no illusions that their job was over. Perhaps there was more yet to test them. When they finally returned to the clearing near the tower, a few elders and guards approached. One elder stepped forward, eyeing their battered condition and the rescued crates. "You encountered actual rogues?" he asked, voice grave. Aaron gestured to the messenger. "Yes, she was wounded. We recovered the supplies. The rogues are gone for now." The messenger stepped forward on shaky legs, speaking up. They saved my life," she said, eyes flicking to each of them, including the Omega. "I would have died or been dragged away if they hadn't come." The elder nodded slowly. "We will see to your wounds," he said, signaling for a guard to assist her. Then he turned to the group, voice low. "It seems you have faced the real threat, not just a fabricated scenario. We will report your actions to the rest of the Watchers." He ushered them toward a medical tent set up near the tower base. Beta Natalia stood nearby, her gaze sharpening when she caught sight of the Omega. "Are you all right?" she inquired quietly. The Omega nodded. "A few bruises, but nothing dire." Natalia's lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing else but seemed relieved. She turned to the elders, conversing in hushed tones. Within an hour, Team 1 returned from their own quadrant, carrying survivors of a staged caravan raid. Their confrontation, apparently, had been purely orchestrated with disguised Watchers acting as aggressors. There was no mention of real rogues in that region, so Regina and Moria's group had faced a different style of challenge, one heavily supervised. Rumors spread quickly that Team 2 had encountered actual dangers. As Watchers and Elders gathered, they tallied up the day's events. An elder made an official announcement, praising both teams for successfully aiding pack members under threat, but giving special note to Team 2 for dealing with genuine rogues. When asked who had best demonstrated leadership qualities among the second team, Aaron offered a diplomatic summary of how they worked together. He noted that the Omega had indeed aided him at a critical moment, preventing a rogue from landing a blow. His words drew curious stares from the crowd, including Regina. Later, away from prying eyes, Moria caught the Omega's arm briefly. "I heard what happened. I'm glad you're safe," she said, tone sincere. "Regina might act like you're beneath her, but you keep proving you can stand with us." She offered a small but genuine smile before walking away to join the others. The Omega watched her go, feeling a gentle stirring of gratitude. Despite the bruises and aches, a sense of achievement spread through her. She had been forced into a situation of real danger, and she had not cowered. Perhaps her path toward the Luna seat was not so impossible. Over the following hours, the elders announced that the third trial, deemed the guardianship test, was complete. Everyone would reconvene at the PAC's main meeting hall the next day for the official results and to learn which candidates would proceed to the final trial. The Watchers had taken extensive notes on each contender's bravery, quick thinking, and cooperation. Nothing was decided yet, but tension buzzed in the air. That evening, the Omega sat on a bench outside the estate, gazing at the pink and orange streaks across the sky as the sun set. Her shoulders still throbbed where she had slammed into a rock during the fight, and her arms carried scratches from brambles. But it was a small price to pay for having proven her willingness to face danger for the pack. She let her thoughts drift to Alpha Alaric. He had watched her calmly when they returned, eyes lingering on the group's injuries and hearing their account of the confrontation. Yet he had spoken few words. Was he privately impressed, or did he remain unmoved? Her heart fluttered strangely at the thought that maybe he was beginning to see her as more than a powerless Omega. But he was still grieving, and his personal walls were formidable. She tried to push the notion aside, telling herself that this wasn't about winning his affection. She was fighting for the right to be Luna, to serve the pack, not to chase after a broken heart. Suddenly, she sensed another presence behind her. Turning, she found Natalia approaching, arms folded. The beta inclined her head in a subtle greeting. "I heard your part in the orchard fiasco," Natalia said. "It was risky, but you showed courage. Keep that up, and you may stand a chance. Still, watch your back. Not everyone appreciates your progress." The Omega met her gaze. "Do you mean Regina?" Natalia's mouth curved faintly. "There are plenty in the pack who are content with the old ways. They resent the idea of an Omega stepping above them. Be cautious, particularly as we enter the final trial." The Omega nodded. Then, remembering how Natalia had intervened against Ingrid, she offered a quiet, heartfelt "thank you for helping me before. I know you're the beta, and it's your duty, but it mattered." Natalia's expression softened for a brief moment. "You remind me of someone I once knew," she murmured. "Someone who believed heart and spirit are just as important as physical might. That person was one of the kindest Lunas this pack ever had. She was not of noble birth either." A flash of sorrow crossed her features, but she did not elaborate. Before the Omega could respond, Natalia excused herself, walking back toward the estate. The Omega remained on the bench, pondering her words. An earlier Luna who was not of high rank, who earned respect through empathy. It was a faint glimmer of hope that she was not the first to defy tradition. The next day, the entire pack buzzed with anticipation as word spread that the elders would publicly announce the final candidates for the last trial. Once again, the meeting hall filled with pack members, the seats packed with curious wolves eager to see who remained in contention. Conversations rose and fell in waves, some whispering about the orchard incident, others speculating that Regina would inevitably triumph. The Omega tried to keep her nerves in check as she slipped into the hall. She found a spot near Moria. They exchanged quick, tense smiles, each uncertain of her fate. Team 1, Regina, Moria, and Elizabeth sat together, each with varying degrees of confidence. Team 2, Aaron, Celeste, Briar, and the Omega had done well, but no one knew how the Watchers would interpret each candidate's performance. At length, the elders took their place on the raised platform. One of them, an older male with silvered hair, lifted his hand for silence. Gradually, the conversations dwindled to an expectant hush. "Our pack has witnessed 3 trials. Many have been eliminated, either by choice or by failure to meet the standards set forth. Only 7 contenders stand here today, but not all 7 will advance to the final grass test." He paused, letting the tension build. "After consulting the Watchers, we have concluded that 5 of you have shown the necessary qualities so far: valor, ingenuity, resilience, and empathy toward pack members. You 5 will compete in the final trial." Murmurs spread like wildfire, and the elder raised a parchment scroll. "When I read your name, Please come forward." The first name called was Regina. She strode confidently to the front, chin high and shoulders squared. The second was Moria, who stepped up with a relieved expression. Then Elizabeth's name rang out, and the noble contender joined them. Next was Briar, who walked with measured grace, her face betraying cautious optimism. The hall went quiet as everyone waited for the fifth and final name. The Omega's heart hammered in her chest, her palms damp with sweat. She felt certain they would choose either Aaron or Celeste, who had strong combat backgrounds. But then, the elder spoke her name clearly, echoing through the hall. A shock rippled across the assembly. She froze, momentarily unable to process what she had just heard. Whispers erupted, some outraged, some amazed. An Omega was moving forward to the last round of the Luna trials. She took a shaky step, then another, until she stood beside Briar. Her heart pounded so fiercely she could hardly breathe. Over the din, she picked out a few remarks of disbelief. This must be a joke. She's no match for Regina. The goddess's sign must be flawed. Undeterred, the elder lifted a hand again. Aaron and Celeste, you both demonstrated commendable skill and bravery. Yet we have determined that these 5 best represent the range of qualities a future Luna needs at this time. We thank you for your service, and your efforts will not be forgotten. Aaron and Celeste bowed graciously, though disappointment flickered in their eyes. The Omega caught Aaron's gaze, and he offered a small, respectful nod, acknowledging her achievement. She gave a tight smile in return, grateful he did not appear resentful. The elder turned to address the pack. Now, for the final trial. It will be called the Oath of Devotion. This test is multifaceted, involving the vow a Luna must make to serve the pack, and it culminates in a ceremony beneath the moon. In ancient times, this trial demanded a wolf prove herself worthy in spirit, body, and heart. It has taken many forms across the centuries, but our tradition remains the same. Only one can stand at the Alpha's side as Luna. The final trial will commence in 3 days, during the next full moon. His gaze swept over the 5 finalists. Prepare yourselves. Train if you must. Reflect on what it means to bear the Luna mantle. In 3 days, your fate and our pack's future will be decided. Once dismissed, the finalists dispersed, besieged by a cacophony of reactions. Some wolves hurried to congratulate Moria or Elizabeth, ignoring the Omega. Others openly questioned whether the elders had lost their sense by permitting an Omega to continue. A few eyes glowed with curiosity. Perhaps they wondered if the Omega's surprising tenacity would shake up the hierarchy. A swirl of emotions gathered in her chest. Relief, pride, fear, and confusion all mingled until she felt dizzy. She pressed through the crowd, longing for a quiet corner to collect her thoughts. But before she could escape, a figure blocked her path. Regina. Clad in a fitted jacket that accentuated her warrior build, Regina looked down at the Omega with an icy glare. "Congratulations," she said in a clipped tone that made it sound more like an insult. "You've made it further than anyone predicted." The Omega straightened her spine, bracing for another cutting remark. Regina's lips twisted into a thin smile. "You may have squeaked by so far, but the Oath of Devotion is no simple test. It demands a demonstration of unity between the Luna candidate and our Alpha in the goddess's eyes. When the time comes, you will fail, and our pack will see that your presence here is a laughable farce." She leaned in, eyes narrowing. "I've trained for this all my life, refining my combat, memorizing pack law, forging alliances with the elders. I've bled for this. You think your little acts of bravery are enough to overshadow years of dedication? The Omega suppressed the tremor in her voice. I don't know what the goddess has planned, she replied softly, but we each have our own path. I am not trying to steal anything from you. I'm just following the call I felt. Regina's expression darkened. Then you're a fool. I'm warning you, back down. Because if you don't, you're going to regret it. The final trial won't be a friendly contest, and my family is prepared to ensure that tradition prevails. With that, Regina brushed past, leaving the Omega standing amid the swirl of wolves. Her threat hung in the air like a rancid odor. The Omega released a shaky breath. She had no illusions that Regina would fight fair in the final test. Determined not to be caught off guard, the Omega decided to spend the next 3 days improving whatever skills she could. She knew she would never match Regina in martial prowess or rival Elizabel's noble knowledge, but she had to make an effort. She sought out the old training grounds near the orchard, hoping to refine her reflexes. To her surprise, when she arrived, she found Moria there as well, practicing forms with a short staff. Moria paused, lifting an eyebrow. I thought you might come here. Heard you made the final cut. Her voice carried neither malice nor warmth, but rather a polite acceptance. The Omega nodded, glancing at the battered wooden dummies around them. I'm not very skilled in combat, but it can't hurt to improve my balance and footwork. Moria twirled her staff and considered the Omega. We all have weaknesses. Mine is that I'm average in hand-to-hand fighting. My mother always berated me for not being fierce enough, but I excel at tactics and reading people's motives. She gestured to a rack of practice weapons. Pick something. Let's see if we can help each other. If you show me more about those herbal remedies you used, I'll give you a few pointers. Though they were still rivals, the Omega sensed that Moria was sincere in her offer. She selected a lightweight wooden baton and held it uncertainly. For the next hour, they traded tips, Moria demonstrating stances and quick strikes, the Omega sharing how to identify common medicinal plants and basic first aid techniques. Their conversation was sometimes halting, but neither wasted time on boasting or threats. When they finally took a break, Moria wiped sweat from her brow. Thanks. Now, if I scrape my arm in the final trial, at least I won't bleed out. The Omega mustered a small grin. And I might not get knocked unconscious in the first 2 seconds. They both laughed quietly, the first moment of camaraderie they'd truly shared. As Moria turned to leave, she offered a lingering thought. If one of us claims the Luna title, I hope we can bring a different kind of leadership to the pack, one that doesn't thrive on intimidation. The Omega watched her go, reflecting on how unexpected alliances could form under pressure. Perhaps the final trial would test not only their strength but their willingness to uphold the highest ideals for the pack. Outside the training grounds, she wandered near the stables where the Beta's horses were kept. She planned to return to her chores when she heard a voice call her name. Turning, she saw a figure approaching, Alpha Alaric. Her heart jumped to her throat. He stopped a few paces away, arms at his sides. His gaze held a quiet intensity. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I wanted to see how you were recovering from the orchard incident. That wound on your shoulder looked painful. She swallowed, surprised by his direct concern. It's healing. It wasn't too serious. After a pause, she added, Thank you for asking. He nodded, glancing at the stable yard. You continue to surprise many in the pack by making it to the final round. Are you surprised yourself? She exhaled softly, uncertain how honest to be. Yes, I am, she admitted, meeting his gaze. But at the same time, I sense that this is the path the goddess chose for me. every trial, I've felt something guiding me. I can't fully explain it, but it's given me courage." A flicker of emotion crossed his face, something akin to respect tempered by sorrow. "My mate believed in the goddess's guidance," he said quietly, eyes distant. "She always said that the goddess's plan was more intricate than we could see, that we must trust even when it seems impossible." He paused, then his expression hardened slightly. "Yet it is difficult to accept that plan, especially when it leads to tragedy." A pang of sympathy welled in the Omega's chest. She chose her words carefully. "Loss can shatter our faith," she said. "But sometimes it also reveals unexpected strengths. I don't claim to know your pain, Alpha, and I can't replace what you've lost. But I do believe the moon goddess still watches over this pack, no matter how dark it gets." Alaric studied her for a moment, caught between grief and a hint of something else. Admiration, perhaps. He broke eye contact, glancing at the stable doors. "In 3 days, the final trial will begin. I must do my part. The elders insist the Alpha must observe and participate in the oath of devotion. If the goddess chooses a new Luna, I will fulfill my duty, even if for Sal. My heart remains elsewhere." His voice shook almost imperceptibly at the end. She wanted to offer comfort, but her place was uncertain. After all, she was one of the very contenders who might stand beside him, stepping into the role once occupied by the mate he loved. Instead, she just lowered her gaze and said softly, "I understand." He turned to go, then paused. "Rest and prepare. The oath of devotion is not a simple formality. You must be ready for anything." With that, he left, his footsteps echoing across the stable yard. The Omega remained there, grappling with a swirl of emotions. On one hand, she felt compassion for Alaric's loss, empathizing with the burden he carried. On the other, she felt an undeniable spark, an awareness that, if chosen, she might share a bond with him that transcended mere duty. But how could she reconcile that with his grief? Even if she succeeded in the final trial, would he ever truly accept her? She shook her head, resolving not to dwell too deeply on matters of the heart. If the goddess willed that she continue, she would. If not, she would at least have shown that an Omega could stand with integrity. Those 3 days felt both fleeting and endless. The pack thrummed with speculation, each day culminating in hushed talk about the final trial. The Omega divided her time between chores, because she was still an Omega at heart, and brief training sessions, honing her reflexes, studying herbal lore, or practicing calm breathing to steady her nerves. She also took solitary walks in the moonlit fields, seeking solace and clarity in the silver glow. More than once, she felt that faint internal quake she had sensed at the bonfire. A subtle, spiritual vibration that told her she was on the right path. Sometimes she would close her eyes and whisper a quiet prayer to the moon goddess, asking for guidance if it was truly her destiny to stand as Luna. Soon, the appointed night arrived. The moon rose full and luminous, casting pale beams across the pack's ceremonial grounds. Located in a clearing ringed by tall pines, the space was adorned with torches and draped in ceremonial fabrics. The entire pack assembled, forming a large circle. At the center stood a stone altar, older than memory, carved with lunar symbols that gleamed in the firelight. The 5 finalists, Regina, Moria, Elizabeth, Briar, and the Omega, lined up at the edge of the clearing, each dressed in garments that reflected her chosen style. Regina wore a sleek outfit that highlighted her athletic form, while Elizabeth donned a flowing robe with embroidered pack crests. Moria opted for a simpler dark tunic and belt, and Briar wore close-fitting attire suitable for agility. The Omega had been loaned a modest but elegant dress from Moria's friend once again, this time in midnight blue. She felt awkward in it, but also oddly proud, as if acknowledging her transformation from servile Omega to a contender for Luna. Elders stood near the altar, heads bowed in reverent silence. Beta Natalia moved around the circle, ensuring everyone had found their place. Finally, Alpha Alaric stepped forward, the torch's glow highlighting the strong lines of his face. He wore black, a simple choice that seemed to mark his mourning. Yet he carried himself with regal bearing, the embodiment of leadership. An elder's voice rang out, clear over the hush. "We gather under the full moon for the oath of devotion. Each candidate who stands here has passed trials of mind, body, and courage. Now, the moon goddess demands proof of your unity with this pack and its alpha. Only one will stand as Luna, chosen by the goddess's will." A wave of tense anticipation rippled across the clearing. The elder continued, "Tonight, you will undertake the rite of reflection in the moon's light. Then, each of you will pledge your devotion before the Alpha, reciting words from your heart. Finally, you will confront the ordeal of the crescent mark, an ancient tradition designed to unveil the wolf who is truly blessed by the moon." The words hung in the cold night air. Many in the crowd shifted or held their breath. The ordeal of the crescent mark had not been performed in generations. Some believed it was too perilous, involving direct communion with the spiritual realm. Others claimed it was a mere ceremony. But no one knew exactly what form it would take, except perhaps the elders who guarded ancient secrets. Regina's eyes gleamed with determination, while Moria's face betrayed a flicker of nervous excitement. Elisabelle held herself like a statue, her calm facade unreadable. Briar twisted her fingers around a small talisman, perhaps for luck. The Omega felt her pulse quicken. She had come this far. Would her journey end in glory or disaster? Torches guttered in a gentle breeze as the moon climbed higher. The elders directed the 5 finalists to step onto a low platform just in front of the stone altar. The rite of reflection was first. "Candidates," an elder said, voice resonant. "Kneel before the altar. Reflect upon your motives for seeking the Luna's mantle. A small cut will be made on your palm, allowing your blood to touch the carved symbols. As your blood is offered, speak the truth that dwells in your heart." One by one, they approached. Regina went first, holding out her hand while an elder used a ceremonial blade to make a shallow cut. She placed her bloody palm against a carved wolf symbol on the altar, bowing her head. Her voice carried clearly, taut with conviction. "I offer my blood to the moon goddess. I seek the Luna title to guide this pack with unwavering strength, so no outsider can threaten us again." She paused, then added, "I vow to uphold the pack's legacy, to keep our traditions alive." The crowd murmured approval. Regina's statement spoke to many who valued martial power and tradition. The elder nodded and beckoned the next candidate. Moria followed, her posture humble. When she cut her palm and pressed it against the altar, she closed her eyes. "I seek the Luna title to bring unity and wisdom. I believe in forging alliances, both within our hearts and beyond our borders, so the pack can flourish. May my devotion to understanding others serve the goddess's Zhao will." Elisabelle recited a poised statement about nobility, duty, and guiding the pack with regal grace. Her words flowed like polished marble, hinting at the training she had received in diplomatic speech. Briar then offered a personal pledge to champion the marginalized within the pack, ensuring every wolf's voice was heard, a reflection of her own mid-tier upbringing. Finally, the elder motioned to the Omega. She stood, knees trembling, and stepped onto the altar's platform. The cold night air bit at her skin. She glanced briefly at Alaric, who watched from one side, arms folded. His expression was difficult to read, but he seemed to hold his breath as she placed her hand on the small cloth the elder provided. The blade's edge was keen, and the quick sting made her flinch. Warm blood welled. She pressed her palm against a crescent moon symbol etched into the stone. Her voice emerged unsteady at first, but it gained strength as she spoke from the depths of her heart. Moon Goddess, I am only an Omega, an ordinary wolf in many eyes. But I have come to believe that our pack thrives not just on strength or status, but on compassion and resilience. I have felt your guiding presence, carrying me when I lacked confidence. If it is your will that I serve as Luna, I vow to protect every life in this pack, from the lowliest Omega to the highest rank, and to treat them with understanding and care. A hush fell as she spoke her final words. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some seemed touched, while others regarded her with skepticism. But she gave everything she had in that pledge. Drawing her hand away, she noticed her blood had left a faint smear on the carved crescent moon, glistening in the torchlight. The elder nodded solemnly. Your truths have been heard. Rise. He turned to address the circle of onlookers. The rite of reflection is complete. Now, we proceed to the vow before the Alpha. Known as the Devotion Oath, each candidate will stand face to face with the Alpha, offering a personal pledge of loyalty. If he finds your vow wanting, he may reject you at this stage. The pack collectively inhaled. This part was widely understood as a test of sincerity, forging a connection between the candidate and the leader they aimed to serve. It was more intimate than the public reflection. One by one, the elders led each finalist to a position in front of Alaric, who stood near the center of the clearing. Regina went first again. She squared her shoulders, looking Alaric in the eye. Alpha, I pledge my loyalty to you and this pack. I offer my sword, my body, my spirit to fortify our legacy. Together, we will stand unbreakable. Alaric's face remained impassive. He said nothing to accept or reject her vow outright. That would be a symbolic gesture after all had spoken. Regina stepped aside, lips pressed tight. Moria approached, calmer. Alpha, I offer my mind and counsel, as well as my devotion. I will stand by your side, ensuring that reason and empathy shape our future. Elizabeth recited a graceful vow, highlighting her lineage and desire to bring honor to the pack. Briar's vow spoke of bridging differences, healing rifts among pack ranks. When the Omega's turn came, her heart pounded so loudly it threatened to drown out all other sound. She approached Alaric, her head bowed at first. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, meeting those dark eyes that once shone with heartbreak and guarded sorrow. Her voice emerged gentle but firm. Alpha, I have no great lineage or extraordinary battle skills. Yet I have devoted my life to understanding this pack from the ground up. If the goddess sees fit, I offer you a partner who will stand by you, not only to protect, but to mend hearts and keep our bond strong. I vow to be a Luna who remembers every struggle, every quiet voice, and fights to make sure none are left behind. For a heartbeat, Alaric's expression softened, as if the grief in his eyes receded, replaced by a flicker of recognition. Then he schooled his features and gave a slight nod, indicating she could step back. The Omega's pulse raced. She thought she saw a shadow of conflict crossing his face, as if he was torn between duty and a longing he did not fully grasp. The elder raised a hand. "We have now heard every pledge. In times past, the Alpha might have accepted or rejected these vows immediately. But tonight, there remains the ordeal of the crescent mark. Only one among you will stand at the end, revealed by the goddess herself. Alpha, your acceptance will come at that moment, when the chosen one emerges from the ordeal bearing the sign." Ooh! The mention of the sign stirred curiosity and apprehension among the crowd. Alaric looked at the elder, then at the 5 finalists. "Then let it be done," he said quietly. A hush descended as the elders prepared the final stage of the trial. They guided the 5 women to the far end of the clearing, where a portion of the forest remained unlit by torches. Dense trees formed a natural archway. In front of this archway, a circle was drawn on the ground with white chalk, intricate runes swirling around the circumference. An elder explained, "The ordeal of the crescent mark is part physical, part spiritual. Each candidate will step into this runic circle under the moon's gaze. You will be transported, symbolically, at least, into a labyrinth formed by your deepest vulnerabilities and the pack's collective memory. It may appear as a dream or vision. Find the path through your illusions and your fears. At the labyrinth's center, the goddess's mark awaits. Retrieve it, bring it back into the moonlight, and it will manifest on the rightful Luna. The rest will be cast out of the illusion or fail to claim the mark." The 5 candidates exchanged uneasy glances. Regina frowned, as if uncertain how to fight illusions that might assail her from within. Elizabeth clenched her jaw in resolve. Moria breathed slowly, mentally steeling herself. Briar wrung her hands, whispering a silent prayer. The Omega felt an odd blend of anticipation and dread. She had survived illusions in the catacombs, but this might be more potent, an ancient, mystical labyrinth that tested one's soul. She silently prayed that her faith and determination would carry her through. The elder ushered them forward. "Step into the circle as one. The ordeal will begin. Only one of you can emerge triumphant with the sign that designates our new Luna." Regina led the way, crossing into the chalk circle with measured steps. The others followed, forming a half-moon arc within the runes. The Omega stood at the far edge, feeling the air grow oddly charged. The runes on the ground began to glow with faint silver light, as though responding to the moon overhead. A tingling sensation crawled up her legs, and she realized her vision was shifting, the edges of the clearing fading into darkness. She looked around, seeing the other 4 women waver and flicker. She had a last glimpse of the gathered pack-watchers, Alaric's form in the distance, the flickering torches, then the entire scene dissolved into swirling shadows. It was as though she was falling into a dream. When the darkness receded, she found herself standing at the entrance to a sprawling labyrinth. Tall hedges arched overhead, woven with night-blooming vines that glowed faintly. She felt a breeze scented with moonflowers and damp earth. No sign of the other 4 contenders was immediately visible. The labyrinth's gravel path stretched in multiple directions, and the silent air hummed with potential illusions. She took a tentative step forward, recalling the elder's instructions. She had to navigate this shifting domain, find the labyrinth's center, and claim the goddess's mark. The path branched repeatedly, sometimes looping back on itself, sometimes leading to dead ends. Occasionally, she spotted silhouettes of the other candidates in the distance, glimpses that vanished around corners. She heard echoes of footsteps, uncertain whether they were real or illusions. Her heart pounded. The hush, broken only by her own breathing, seemed ominous. She remembered how illusions preyed on doubt and fear. Would she once again face voices mocking her Omega status? Or might there be something more harrowing? She came to a small courtyard in the labyrinth, a circular clearing ringed by rose bushes. In the center, a pedestal held a bowl of water. She approached, peering into the liquid. Her reflection shimmered, then changed before her eyes, becoming a frail version of herself dressed in rags, weeping. A voice whispered, "You are not fit to be Luna. You are only an Omega, born to serve." The reflection parted its lips in a silent sob. Tremors of old insecurity flared. She clutched the bowl's rim, fighting the wave of self-doubt. She forced her voice to remain steady. "I have come too far to give in. I have proven that strength is not always about rank." She shut her eyes, breathing slowly. When she opened them again, the reflection returned to normal, the distorted image gone. Continuing deeper, she encountered illusions of Ingrid stepping out from behind the hedges, brandishing a stick, spewing hate. She heard the bullying words from her childhood, scornful jibes, curses about her birth. Yet each time, she pressed forward, relying on the same inner fortitude that had guided her through the catacombs and the orchard. Whenever she refused to cower, the illusions dissolved into mist. Still, a gnawing sensation told her that the labyrinth's greatest trial had yet to come. She turned a corner and nearly stumbled upon Moria. The other woman stood facing a swirling mass of fog that formed ghostly figures. Moria's face twisted with fear, tears streaming down her cheeks. She appeared to be reliving a memory, as the apparitions howled accusations of failure. The Omega hesitated. In the real world, they were rivals. Should she help Moria again, or focus on forging ahead alone? After all, only one could claim the mark. But remembering the orchard, how Moria had helped her train, how they shared tips, she couldn't just abandon a comrade in torment. Compassion reasserted itself. She stepped toward Moria, laying a hand on her shoulder. "They are illusions," she said softly. "Breathe. Listen to your own truth." Moria gasped, momentarily disoriented. She looked at the Omega with wide, tear-filled eyes. The illusions dissolved somewhat, as if weakened by empathy and reassurance. Moria swallowed hard, pushing her hair back. I thought I could do this alone." Her voice broke. "But they're showing me my family's scorn, my mother's resentment." The Omega gently squeezed her arm. "Then prove them wrong by continuing. You are strong enough." Moria managed a tremulous nod. "Go. You need to find the center. I'll be all right now." She inhaled, wiping her cheeks. "Thank you. Again." They parted ways, each forging her own path in the labyrinth. Darkness pressed in, but the faint glow of moonlit vines guided the Omega. She passed twisted passages that seemed to shift behind her, preventing any return once she moved forward. Each time she felt that quiver of the goddess's presence, it urged her to keep walking. Suddenly, a haunting wail echoed through the corridor. She froze, straining to identify its source. It sounded human, laced with anguish. Rounding a corner, she spotted Regina, kneeling beside a spectral figure. This figure resembled a man with a savage wound across his chest, an illusion, perhaps representing someone from Regina's past. Regina's posture shook with tension. Her face was contorted in horror, as if she confronted a guilt or sorrow that threatened to break her. The Omega lingered at a distance, unsure whether to approach. Regina had always been hostile, determined to see the Omega fail. Would she accept help? Did she even want it? A swirl of conflicting thoughts halted the Omega's progress. Compassion tugged at her, urging her to extend the same empathy. But she remembered Regina's threat, the scorn, the pride. She hesitated. Then Regina looked up, eyes bloodshot with tears, but her expression twisted in rage at the sight of the Omega. "Stay away," she spat, voice echoing off the hedge walls. "I don't need your pity." Though a pang of sympathy struck her, the Omega obeyed. She stepped back, giving Regina space. "All right, take care," she murmured, turning to continue her own path. She tried not to think about the haunted torment behind Regina's fury, or about the ghosts that plagued each of them in this trial. They were illusions, yet illusions could cut deeply if they sprang from real pain. Time blurred in the labyrinth, each corridor a test of will. She glimpsed Briar once, darting around a corner, her face set with resolve. She saw Elizabeth in a clearing, reciting what sounded like a mantra of self-assurance. Now and then, the hedges rustled with unseen shapes. At length, the Omega came to a threshold formed by an ornate arch in the vines. Beyond it lay a stone courtyard bathed in pale moonlight. A massive fountain dominated the center, shaped like two wolves entwined beneath a crescent moon. Water trickled from the carved wolves' mouths, shimmering under an otherworldly glow. She stepped into the courtyard, heart jumping as she recognized the place as a likely center of the labyrinth. If the mark was anywhere, it should be here. The air felt dense with spiritual energy. Each step forward sent ripples of sensation through her body, as though the goddess hovered close. Approaching the fountain, she saw a small pedestal at its base. On that pedestal lay a silver emblem, shaped like a crescent moon. It seemed to vibrate with faint light. This must be the mark, she realized. If she touched it, would it grant her the final blessing? Or was there a further step? She reached out, fingers trembling. But just as she was about to lift the emblem, a wave of cold darkness engulfed the courtyard. Wind howled, and an intense illusion materialized. A figure formed of shadow and sorrow. She gasped, recognizing it as a warped echo of Alpha Alaric. His face glistened with tears, voice choked with accusation. "Why would you dare to replace the mate I lost?" the shadow hissed. "You are not worthy of that bond. You could never love me like she did." Tears stung the Omega's eyes. She knew it wasn't truly Alaric, but the anguish in that voice was all too real. Her fear that she could never fill the shoes of a beloved mate pounded in her chest, gnawing at her sense of worth. She recalled Alaric's grief, how he seemed locked away in mourning. Was it possible he would resent her if the goddess chose her? A swirl of doubt threatened to paralyze her. She trembled, dropping her hand from the emblem. The shadow advanced, eyes ablaze with sorrowful rage. "Leave this place," it commanded. "He will never accept you." Clutching her trembling fingers, the Omega drew a shaky breath. She had to confront this. The labyrinth's illusions aimed to exploit her deepest vulnerability, the fear that she was an intruder in the Alpha's heart, an Omega presuming to stand where his true mate once did. Yet she remembered the orchard, the catacombs, the unwavering sense of guidance. She recalled the vow she made at the altar, her desire to serve the pack and honor the goddess's will. She would not shame that calling by succumbing to doubt. Voice unsteady, she confronted the specter. "I can't replace what was lost, nor do I intend to erase a cherished memory. But if the goddess has chosen me, I will stand by Alaric with loyalty, patience, and kindness, without trying to overshadow his pain. I may be an Omega, but my heart holds love enough to guide this pack." With those words, the shadow flickered, letting out a tortured wail. Slowly, It dissolved into streaks of darkness, fading into the starry sky overhead. In its wake, the courtyard brightened again, revealing the fountain's silver glow. Tears dripped from the Omega's lashes, and she let out a shaky exhale. She had faced that final doubt, and she had not run from it. Now, no barrier stood between her and the silver emblem. She stepped forward once more, curling her fingers around the delicate crescent shape. Cool energy pulsed through the metal. The labyrinth around her quivered, as though an earthquake rippled through the hedges. She staggered, clutching the emblem to her chest. A brilliant silvery radiance flared. Then the world of vines and illusions collapsed. She found herself back in the clearing, kneeling on the ground, her hand still grasping the emblem. Torchlight and moonlight danced across her vision. The rest of the pack remained gathered in a wide circle. The other 4 finalists were also reappearing, each in a similar daze. Some emerged empty-handed, faces etched with defeat. Others gasped, trying to hold on to illusions that vanished in the real world. An elder stepped forward, scanning them all. "Who among you has retrieved the goddess's mark?" Moria lifted her shaking hands. No mark rested there. She bowed her head in sorrow. Briar held her empty palms open, exhaling sadly. Elizabeth wiped tears from her face, lost in confusion. Regina staggered upright, a snarl twisting her features, and thrust out a silver shape in triumph. For a moment the crowd gasped, seeing she held what looked like a crescent piece. But as she opened her hand further, the metal tarnished instantly, crumbling to dust. Regina stared in horror, realization dawning that it was no true mark, only an illusion. She let out a cry of rage. Then the Omega looked down at her own hand. The silver emblem still glowed, intact. Its light seemed to resonate with her heartbeat. She glanced up, feeling the eyes of the entire pack upon her. An elder whispered in awe, "The Omega holds the goddess's sign." A shock-wave of disbelief rattled the clearing. Wolves whispered and gasped. Some stepped forward, peering at the shimmering crescent. The Omega rose to unsteady feet, tears of wonder sliding down her cheeks. She never imagined she would be the one deemed worthy by the ancient magic. Regina let out a raw snarl of protest. "Impossible!" She lunged at the Omega, as if to snatch the symbol away, but Beta Natalia and 2 guards intercepted her, restraining her fury. "She must have cheated," Regina spat. "That's not the real mark. It can't be." The elders approached, studying the emblem in the Omega's hand. In front of everyone, it brightened, almost too bright to behold. When it dimmed again, the shape seemed etched into the Omega's skin, as though the metal had bonded with her flesh. The elder turned to the crowd and announced in a trembling voice, "The mark has chosen its bearer. In accordance with our ancient traditions, we present the new Luna of this pack." A collective cry rose from onlookers, some in awe, some outraged. The noise became a swirl of confusion, cheers, and protests. Yet the glowing crescent in the Omega's hand was indisputable proof. Ancient laws stated that the ordeal was final. No one could question the goddess's choice once manifested. Alpha Alaric stepped forward, parting the crowd, his eyes fixated on the Omega, taking in the sight of the silver mark. Time seemed to slow. She felt her heart pounding, uncertain how he would react. Would he resist this outcome, or abide by tradition? He stopped before her, so close she could feel the warmth of his presence. For a long moment he said nothing, simply gazing at the shimmering crescent upon her skin. At last he lifted his hand, fingers lightly brushing her palm. The contact was gentle, almost reverent. His dark eyes revealed a tumult of emotion, grief, surprise, conflict, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of acceptance. The pack grew hushed, every wolf watching breathlessly. Slowly, Alaric lowered himself to one knee, a symbolic gesture of acknowledging the goddess's decision. In a voice laced with quiet resignation and reverence, he spoke. "Moon goddess, I heed your will. If this Omega is the one you have chosen to stand as Luna, I pledge to honor this bond for the sake of my pack. May she guide us with the empathy and strength that only you could bestow." The Omega's eyes brimmed with tears. She thought she heard a faint tremor in Alaric's voice, as if he was grappling with acceptance of a destiny he had not imagined. She extended her free hand, resting it gently on his shoulder. I promise I will do all I can to protect and serve our pack, with your guidance and the goddess's blessing." In that instant, the silver mark on her hand flared once more, then faded into a subtle crescent scar on her skin, sealed. A sense of finality settled over the clearing. The elders bowed, acknowledging the new Luna as tradition demanded. Regina's angry protests were drowned out by the triumphant chanting of others who believed in the goddess's wisdom. Moria lowered her head in acceptance, tears slipping free, a bittersweet combination of disappointment and relief. Elizabeth looked stunned, and Briar let out a quiet sigh, placing her hand over her heart. The Omega, no, the new Luna, stood beside the kneeling Alpha, face streaked with tears. The entire scene felt unreal. She had never once believed she would stand here, recognized by the entire pack. Pain, doubt, and scorn had pursued her through every step of the trials. But in the end, the goddess's sign was upon her. That night, the pack's elders and leadership convened in the Great Hall for a brief ceremony acknowledging the new Luna's position. Formalities would continue over the coming days. Traditionally, the Luna was crowned with the pack crest, introduced in official gatherings, and placed in charge of specific duties. But the ordeal was the decisive moment, and no one could refute its outcome. Some of the pack accepted her graciously, offering timid smiles or polite bows. Others looked away in disgust or confusion. The newly titled Luna tried to remain poised, though every fiber of her being trembled with adrenaline and uncertainty. Alaric, stoic as ever, stood by her side, fulfilling his duty. Yet she noticed cracks in his demeanor, a fleeting gentleness, a sorrow that lingered in his eyes, and perhaps a guarded spark of hope. When the initial ceremony finished, the crowd began to disperse. The new Luna felt the weight of exhaustion. She had endured illusions, confessions, physical trials, and emotional warfare. Still, she could not rest just yet. She made her way to the side of the hall, seeking a moment of solitude among the tall windows that overlooked the courtyard. Before she could gather her thoughts, she sensed Alaric approach. She turned to face him, heart thumping. He looked at her with a mixture of quiet respect and lingering sadness. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You have proven yourself to the pack and to the goddess." She studied his face, uncertain how to respond. "I know this must be hard for you," she said gently, "having to accept a new Luna when you're still grieving." She let her gaze drop, trying not to intrude on a pain that was not hers. He drew in a long breath. "Yes," he admitted. "I never thought I would stand here again, at another Luna's side. It feels disloyal to my mate's memory, but our pack cannot remain leaderless." And the goddess's sign was clear. His voice caught slightly on the last word, betraying a depth of conflict. She hesitated, then ventured, "Your sorrow does not diminish what you had with your mate. and my presence here doesn't erase her from the pack's memory or your heart. I only wish to help us move forward, not replace what was lost." Alaric's expression softened fractionally. "You speak with a kindness I'm not accustomed to. My former mate had a similar heart. She saw the best in everyone, championed equality among ranks." He shook his head, as if banishing a ghost. "I will try. It may take time for me to open myself, but I will not forsake the duties we share now." She nodded, quietly relieved that he harbored no open resentment. Duty would unite them at first. True closeness might take longer. In that moment, a sense of peace settled in her, and the subtle quake she felt when the goddess guided her returned. It was as if an invisible bond had begun spinning threads of destiny between them, each thread fine and delicate, but luminous with possibility. The following days brought a whirlwind of changes. The new Luna moved her scant belongings from the Omega dormitory to a modest room within the main estate, formerly used by visiting dignitaries. Though the space felt luxurious to her, it was nothing like the grand suite once shared by Alaric and his late mate. That place remained locked, presumably while Alaric navigated his grief. She did not question it, respecting his boundary. News of the Omega turned Luna spread throughout the territory. Some younger wolves looked at her with awe, inspired by the idea that rank could be transcended. Others spread dark mutters that the pack had lost its way, letting tradition crumble. Ingrid and her circle scowled whenever the Luna passed, though they dared not attack her openly now that she held an official position. She spent much of her time learning from the elders about the Luna's responsibilities, coordinating the care of Omegas and other marginalized wolves, overseeing festivals, consulting on border policies, and acting as a calming voice in leadership councils. Her heart soared at the chance to advocate for those who had once been overlooked. Despite her new role, she still performed some menial tasks by habit, helping in the kitchens or assisting with cleaning. "More than once," the staff exclaimed. "My Luna, you needn't lower yourself to this." But she waved them off, explaining that she wished to remain connected to every level of pack life. This humility baffled many, but it also slowly earned her genuine respect, at least among those open-minded enough to see that a Luna's worth was measured by more than pride. At night, she often wandered the courtyard or the estate halls, uncertain how to bridge the emotional distance with Alaric. He remained courteous, including her in council meetings, hearing her opinions on matters of security or resource management. Yet there was an unspoken barrier in his eyes, as though he kept an entire chamber of his heart locked away. One cool evening, she found herself in the library, perusing old records of pack treaties, trying to familiarize herself with her new duties. The place was dimly lit by lamps, the air thick with the scent of parchment. She sat at a broad wooden table, reading by the soft glow, the hush soothing her nerves. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps made her look up. Alaric stood near the doorway, observing her. She quickly stood. "Alpha," she said, voice quiet so as not to disturb the hush. He approached, gestures reserved, though his eyes carried a subdued warmth she had not seen often. "You don't need to call me Alpha anymore," he said gently. "We are equals as leaders, even if you choose to address me by name or title as you see fit." Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you," she replied softly, unsure if she could comfortably address him by name yet. That might feel too personal, especially given the tension swirling between them. He glanced at the open books. "You're studying the old alliances. Thorough as always." She mustered a small smile. "I feel like I have a lot to catch up on." He nodded. My mate used to love this library. She'd spent hours lost in these records, searching for ways to improve relationships between packs. When she was alive, the hallways felt different, like they were brimming with hope. He trailed off, gaze drifting across the shelves. Her heart clenched with empathy. She must have been a remarkable Luna, she said softly, meaning it. The quiet sorrow in his voice stirred her. A part of her wanted to console him, yet she recognized his grief would never be simple to heal. He ran his fingers over the worn spines of a few volumes. She was, he admitted, and I see glimmers of her kindness in you, though you are your own person. The staff speaks highly of how you continue to help them, how you want to raise the status of Omegas. My mate believed in that too. She paused, absorbing his unexpected praise. I'm honored that you see a resemblance. I can't replace her, but perhaps I can continue some of her ideals. For a long moment, they simply gazed at each other amidst the towering shelves. Then he inhaled, as if drawing strength from the stillness. I would like to invite you to join me tomorrow at dusk, near the orchard. There's a part of the territory I haven't visited since her passing. I think it's time I go back, and maybe you should see it too, as Luna. Her heart fluttered. Of course, I'll be there. He gave a terse nod, turning to go. Before leaving, he cast a last glance back, something akin to gratitude in his expression. The door closed behind him, leaving her in the library, heart racing. True to his word, the next evening, they set out just before dusk, traveling on foot to a quiet meadow west of the orchard. The day had been busy with councils and daily tasks, leaving the new Luna little time to ponder what might happen. Even so, she sensed that this outing was important, a tentative step forward in forging a real bond with Alaric. The meadows stretched wide, filled with tall grass that swayed in the fading sunlight. In the distance, hills rose gently, casting long shadows across the field. Alaric led the way, his strides purposeful but unhurried. She followed, inhaling the sweet scent of grasses and a faint tang of pine drifting from the nearby forest. They reached a low knoll at the meadow's edge. A singular oak tree stood there, its branches thick and ancient, leaves whispering in the evening breeze. Alaric paused beneath the tree, resting a hand on its trunk. She could see the strain in his features, as if memory weighed heavily. This was where we used to come to watch sunsets, he said quietly. My mate loved the sky at dusk. She said the colors reminded her of hope rising from sorrow. She gently placed a hand on the tree's bark as well, feeling the rough texture. I see why she loved it, she said, looking across the meadow, where the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of gold and crimson. Alaric turned to face her. The wind ruffled his hair, and for a moment, he looked both strong and vulnerable. I don't pretend this is easy, he admitted in a hushed tone. But you are my Luna now, chosen by the goddess. I would like to at least try to share parts of my world with you, including the memories that still ache. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. She stepped closer, daring to place a hand gently against his arm. I appreciate your trust, and I want you to know, you don't have to rush through grief for the sake of appearances. I'm here whenever you need to talk. He regarded her with a quiet intensity, the shadow of sorrow in his eyes giving way to a delicate tenderness. You speak as though you truly care, he said, voice thick with emotion. I do, she whispered, her heart pounding. You may have lost the one you loved, but you don't have to lose yourself. The pack needs you, and I'd like to help carry that burden, in whatever way I can. Alaric exhaled shakily. Then let us watch the sunset together. He led her to a small rise where they could see the sky's vibrant colors spilling over the horizon. They stood side by side, silent except for the rustle of grass and the low chirping of distant crickets. As twilight deepened, the new Luna felt an unexpected warmth blossom inside her. It wasn't the all-consuming rush of romance she had read in stories, but rather a gentle, cautious hope. A sense that they might discover something genuine together, built on mutual respect and acceptance of each other's scars. Beside her, Alaric's posture gradually softened, as if breathing a bit easier in her company. He didn't speak of love, nor did she, but the hush between them was comfortable. A shared solace in the midst of heartbreak and new beginnings. Night fell fully, revealing the moon in a silver arc overhead. The Omega turned Luna closed her eyes for a moment, recalling her vow at the bonfire weeks ago, the quake of destiny that pushed her into the trials, and the illusions she had overcome. She reflected on how far she had come, from sweeping courtyards and cowering before bullies, to standing here, recognized by the goddess, forging a tentative bond with the Alpha. When she opened her eyes, she found Alaric looking at her, a softness in his gaze she had never seen before. She offered a small, hopeful smile. Neither said anything, yet it felt like an unspoken promise passed between them under the moon's glow, an acknowledgement that, though the path was strewn with sorrow and the future uncertain, they would walk it together. In the days that followed, the new Luna began her official duties in earnest. She sat in on border negotiations, proposed improvements to living conditions for Omegas, and started a project to renovate older sections of the estate. Though many were skeptical at first, her persistence and insight convinced some reluctant elders to give her ideas a try. Seeing real changes that benefited the lower-ranked wolves fueled her resolve. She threw herself into the role wholeheartedly, learning the intricacies of leadership with each passing day. Alaric gradually involved her in decisions that once would have been reserved for the Alpha alone. He sought her perspective on a dispute between two neighboring packs, even allowing her to draft part of the treaty proposal. This practical cooperation fostered a growing camaraderie. He no longer treated her as a subordinate, but as a partner whose voice mattered. Outside the council chambers, they continued to navigate their personal relationship. Their conversations remained tentative, each mindful of his lost mate. Yet the more they spoke, the more trust formed, like seeds sprouting in newly turned soil. At times, she sensed a flicker of guilt in him, as though he questioned whether forging an emotional bond was a betrayal of his past. She tried not to push, offering only understanding in whatever measure he could accept. Meanwhile, Regina's fury simmered in the background. Stripped of her chance at Luna, she lingered on the fringes, gathering supporters who muttered that the trials had been biased. Ingrid and other detractors found common cause with Regina, sharing resentment toward an Omega who had seemingly shattered tradition. Yet the new Luna's official standing made direct attacks impossible without incurring the Alpha's wrath. Tension smoldered like coals beneath the pack's surface, but the Luna was too focused on her new responsibilities to dwell on it. She simply took precautions and maintained watchful awareness. One afternoon, Alaric offered to show her the tactical overview of the pack's territory from a vantage point atop the estate's tower. She accepted eagerly, wanting to learn more about defenses. As they climbed the winding staircase, the wind whistled through small windows. Up top, the view sprawled magnificently, rolling forests, clear rivers, and the silhouette of distant mountains. She marveled at it, reflecting on how a short time ago her world had seemed confined to kitchens and laundries. Alaric stood at her side, pointing out key landmarks. "We have a patrol station near that ridge. Over there is the path we use for trade routes." He paused, turning to her. But you probably know these lands from an Omega's perspective, gathering herbs, delivering supplies. You've walked routes I never have. She smiled. I have. Maybe one day I can show you my favorite trails in the far meadows. They're hidden from most, but I found them during errands. He regarded her with genuine curiosity. I'd like that, he said softly. There was a moment of silence, punctuated by the sound of wind rustling over the tower. She felt a pang of warmth in her chest. Step by step, he was letting her in. As the weeks slipped by, the newly ascended Luna noticed small yet significant shifts in pack dynamics. Some of the tension toward her softened, replaced by curiosity and a grudging respect, especially when she intervened to resolve minor disputes or used her knowledge of daily pack life to streamline chores. Others remained hostile, clinging to resentment. Regina seethed, refusing to speak to the Luna if they crossed paths, storming out of gatherings. The Luna maintained composure, praying that time might assuage those wounds. One evening, the Beta, Natalia, approached the Luna in the corridor outside the council room. Natalia gave a short bow. My Luna, might we speak privately? Her tone was polite, but her eyes held a flicker of urgency. The Luna led her to a small, unoccupied side chamber. What is it, Beta? She asked, slight concern in her voice. Natalia studied her intently. There are rumors that a rogue faction has gathered in the northwest. Not just scavengers, but an organized group that might be allied with a rival pack. They could threaten our borders. The Luna's pulse quickened. Rogues with alliances? That's dangerous. Have you told Alaric? Natalia nodded. Yes, but I wanted your perspective. You, more than most Lunas I've known, have empathy for the outcasts. Perhaps we can find a diplomatic approach before resorting to violence. Alternatively, we can strengthen our Sale. Patrols. The Luna bit her lip, considering. The orchard incident replayed in her mind, how desperation drove rogues to commit crimes. We should try to understand what's driving them. If it's resources, maybe we can negotiate. But we must also keep the pack safe. Natalia crossed her arms thoughtfully. Then we'll propose a balanced plan. An envoy for negotiations backed by discreet but prepared guards. Alaric respects your opinion. If you suggest it, he might agree. Touched by Natalia's confidence, the Luna nodded. Let's do that. I'll speak with him immediately. Later that night, she found Alaric in his private study, reviewing a stack of reports. A single lamp illuminated the space, casting warm light across maps pinned to the walls. At her knock, he looked up, tension etched on his brow. She stepped in, shutting the door behind her. Natalia informed me about the rogue threat, she said, gently placing a hand on the desk. What do you think? He sighed. We've seen rising rogue activity. Some say they're banding with a small breakaway group from a neighboring pack. If they organize, they could be a real threat to our borders. She inhaled, recalling the conversation with Natalia. I propose we dispatch a small envoy. Let them see that we're prepared to defend ourselves, but also willing to talk. We might avert bloodshed. He studied her face. You'd lead the envoy? He asked, voice careful. She blinked in surprise, having not fully considered that possibility. Yet it made sense. As Luna, she should represent a bridge of empathy. Yes, she finally replied, though her heart fluttered with fear. If you agree, I'd like to try reasoning with them. He paused, then nodded slowly. A balanced approach, with enough guards to ensure your safety. I won't risk sending you without protection. She gave a small, grateful smile. Thank you. They spent the next hour strategizing. His keen tactical mind and her empathetic approach merged into a plan they hoped would quell the conflict. As they worked, she sensed a subtle ease in their dynamic, once marked by caution, now laced with mutual respect. Occasionally, they caught each other's gaze, and an unspoken warmth passed between them. After they settled details, Alaric sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Your presence has changed this pack in a short time," he mused. "I find myself relieved in some ways, as if a new wind has entered these halls." Her cheeks heated. She leaned forward, voice low. "Change can be uncomfortable, but sometimes it's necessary for healing." He nodded, exhaling. "Yes, and healing is something I never thought possible." His gaze flickered to a framed keepsake on a nearby shelf, a small portrait of his late mate. He swallowed, words catching in his throat. "I loved her more than life. That won't disappear. But I do feel that maybe the goddess wouldn't have chosen you unless it was part of a new path, for me, for all of us." She reached across the desk, tentatively covering his hand with her own. "I'm not here to erase her memory. We can carry her legacy forward together. I'm ready to stand beside you, if you'll let me." For a moment, he squeezed her hand, emotions shimmering in his dark eyes. "Then let us walk this road, wherever it leads," he said quietly. The next few days were consumed by preparations for the envoy. The new Luna selected a small retinue of trustworthy guards. Bede and Natalia oversaw combat readiness, while the Luna arranged supplies to possibly share with the rogue group. Food, blankets, a sign of goodwill. Whispers circulated around the pack, some praising the Luna's compassion, others fearful of betrayal or accusing her of weakness. Regina, in particular, scoffed loudly at the notion of appeasing vagabonds. Still, the Luna remained resolute, confident this mission could avert a larger conflict. They set out at dawn, traveling northwest along a rugged trail that wound through forests and rocky outcrops. Natalia guided them, her posture alert. The Luna rode in a modest wagon, carrying the supplies and accompanied by 2 guards. She preferred to walk or ride horseback, but the wagon allowed them to transport more goods. Tension coiled in her stomach. She recalled the orchard fight. Would these rogues be equally hostile or open to negotiation? By midday, they reached a clearing near a shallow river where their scouts had indicated rogue sightings. The group halted, scanning the area. Dense trees lined the far bank, concealing any watchers. A hush descended, broken only by the burbling water and occasional bird call. Natalia cupped her hands around her mouth, calling out, "We come in peace on behalf of the pack. We wish to speak with your leaders." For a while, nothing happened. Then rustling among the foliage signaled movement. A half-dozen figures emerged, armed, ragged, but coordinated. Their eyes glinted with caution and suspicion. One stepped forward, a stocky man with scars across his arms. "Why should we trust you?" he demanded, brandishing a makeshift spear. The Luna slid carefully off the wagon seat. Natalia gave her a protective glance, but she nodded, indicating she would handle this. "We brought supplies," she said, keeping her voice level. "Blankets, some food. We know living as rogues can be harsh. We want to discuss if there's a way to coexist without violence." A few of the rogues scowled, muttering about pack arrogance. The leader spat on the ground. "Your pack hunts us, drives us away. Now you show up playing the saint? Why?" The Luna inhaled, choosing her words carefully. "It's true that tensions have run high. But we have a new leadership approach, a willingness to hear your grievances. If we can find a peaceful solution, fewer lives will be lost on both sides. Us. B. The man studied her, narrowing his eyes. What do you get out of it, Luna? Her heart fluttered at the title, rarely used outside her territory. Stability, she answered honestly. I was an Omega, so I know what it's like to be cast aside. I believe there's a better way than constant conflict. An uneasy stir ran through the rogue group. Perhaps they didn't expect an admission of weakness or a personal confession from a Luna. One or two looked intrigued, glancing at each other. The stocky man lowered his spear fractionally. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the clearing. Don't buy her lies. A figure emerged from the trees, a tall woman with stringy hair and a bitter sneer. The Luna recognized her immediately, the muscular rogue from the orchard, the one who had tried to stab Briar. This is the same pack that attacked us, forced us to flee. They killed our comrades and left us to starve. Natalia bristled. You stole supplies and injured a messenger. We responded to protect our people. Rubbish, the rogue woman retorted. We had no choice. Your territory is large, we were starving. The pack hoards resources for its precious ranks. Her gaze flicked to the Luna. And you, I remember you. The Luna swallowed. She remembered that fight, how desperation fueled their aggression. I'm sorry for any loss you suffered, she said softly. But we can't mend the past by exchanging violence. That's why we're here with supplies. The woman's face twisted in contempt. So you pity us? You think a few blankets will buy our loyalty? She hefted a battered sword. We've joined forces with outcasts from the neighboring pack. We won't be pushed around anymore. The tension skyrocketed. Natalia subtly gestured for the guards to brace themselves. The stocky man, apparently outranked by the woman, stepped aside, letting her take control. She glared at the Luna. Get out of here if you value your lives. This territory belongs to rogues now. The Luna's pulse thundered. Diplomacy was collapsing. She glanced at Natalia, who looked ready to protect her if it came to a fight. But the Luna had one last idea. She opened the wagon's side panel, revealing carefully prepared bundles of food and clothes. We brought these to show our sincerity, she said, stepping forward. Take them as a gesture of peace. If you refuse, we'll leave you be. But know that continuing to harass our borders will force us to defend ourselves. A few rogues eyed the supplies hungrily, especially those who looked underfed. The tall woman's face hardened, torn between need and resentment. Her hand gripped the sword hilt. At that moment, the Luna braced for the worst. Suddenly, a shout rang out from behind the rogues. Another group emerged, this one led by a lanky man with cunning eyes. Judging by his posture, he was from the rival pack that had split off. He surveyed the scene with a calculating expression. Well, well, he said, addressing the tall rogue woman. So, the pack sends envoys with gifts. Are you going soft now? She stiffened. We don't trust them. But perhaps we can use what they brought. Her gaze flicked dangerously to the Luna. Hand it over and go, she spat. The Luna felt a swell of frustration. They were so close to bridging a conversation, but fear and anger overshadowed reason. She bit her lip. If you're willing to talk, we can establish a more permanent arrangement, safe zones or shared resources. But if you only want to take these and still threaten us, we'll have no choice but to retaliate. The cunning man chuckled darkly. I doubt your alpha can remain so magnanimous if we keep testing his borders. But we might consider a truce, provided you meet our demands for ongoing support. Natalia's voice tightened. Support in what sense? A smirk spread across the man's face. We need more than food. Weapons, medicine, a real foothold in your territory. Otherwise, we might press an alliance with your rivals, ones who want to see your pack humbled. The Luna's stomach churned. Providing them with unlimited weapons was out of the question. That would only fuel more lawless raids, endangering innocent wolves. Yet turning them away entirely could incite them to unite with hostile packs. She recalled Alaric's warning that negotiations with rogues could be precarious. He had entrusted her with this mission, but it was more complex than she expected. Natalia's jaw tightened. That's not happening. The tall rogue woman barked a harsh laugh. You see? This is pointless. Let's just take what they brought now, and if we want more, we'll carve it from their territory. Enough talk. In a flash, weapons were raised. The rogues advanced with menacing intent. Natalia and the guards responded, forming a defensive line around the Luna. She felt her pulse spike, fear warring with resolve. She didn't want bloodshed, but the rogues left them little choice. She signaled to Natalia. We try to subdue without killing, she said urgently. If they refuse to stand down, we defend ourselves. Then we withdraw. Natalia nodded, meeting the first rogue's thrust with a swift parry of her spear. The clearing erupted in chaos. Steel clashed. Shouts echoed. Dust rose from trampled ground. The Luna stepped back, scanning for a way to avoid escalation. But the rogues seemed intent on driving them off at any cost. One rogue lunged at the wagon, presumably to seize the supplies. A guard tackled him, wrestling the thief away. Another rogue swung a club at Natalia, who dodged and retaliated with the blunt end of her spear. The tall woman roared, charging straight toward the Luna, sword raised high. The Luna's heartbeat hammered in her ears. She only had a small blade tucked in her belt for protection. She held it up, bracing herself. The rogue woman slashed down, forcing her to scramble aside. Pain lanced her arm as the blade nicked her flesh. She cried out, stumbling backward. Suddenly, a guard jumped in, blocking the next strike with his shield. Natalia rushed over, driving the rogue woman back with a well-aimed thrust. The attacker hissed in pain but refused to yield, howling at the other rogues to keep fighting. More of the cunning man's faction spilled from the trees. It became clear the envoy was outnumbered. The Luna pressed a hand to her bleeding arm, dizziness swirling. Natalia shouted, "We must withdraw!" There are too many. The new Luna realized they had to retreat or risk being slaughtered. Their mission to negotiate had failed, at least with this faction. She nodded, face grim. "Fall back. Regroup at the border," she called, voice quavering. The guards formed a protective circle around her. Despite swinging weapons and furious roars, they managed to break free, returning to the wagon. One guard snapped the reins, urging the horses into a gallop away from the clearing. Rogues swarmed behind them, but after a short pursuit, they stopped, perhaps unwilling to chase them too far into pack territory where reinforcements might lie. The Luna sat in the jostling wagon, breathing heavily, blood seeping through her makeshift bandage. Natalia glowered at the retreating rogues, brow furrowed. "We'll have to report this. War might be inevitable, unless we find another approach." The Luna swallowed a bitter taste, tears burning her eyes. She had tried to avoid needless violence, but the rogues' desperation and rage overshadowed any chance of reason. As they rumbled away, she feared what might await them at home, the possibility of a larger conflict forming, the knowledge that she had returned wounded and unsuccessful in forging peace. She prayed that Alaric would not lose faith in her. Their envoy returned to the pack's estate late in the evening. Word of the skirmish spread quickly, and Alaric himself rushed out to meet them in the courtyard. His expression darkened at the sight of the Luna's injured arm. "You're hurt," he said sharply, guiding her off the wagon. She winced, trying to steady herself. "It's not too deep," she murmured. "Natalia and the guards are mostly all right, but the negotiations failed. The rogues demanded too much." Alaric's jaw tensed. "We'll see to your wound, then discuss our next steps." He turned to the guards. "Take her to the infirmary. I'll call a council meeting immediately." In the infirmary, a healer cleaned and bandaged the gash. The pain throbbed, a stark reminder of how fragile peace could be. The Luna closed her eyes, exhaustion sinking in. She overheard Alaric speaking softly with Natalia outside the door, gleaming that the possibility of a rogue alliance was indeed serious. Moments later, Alaric stepped in, concern etched in his face. "The council is gathering. I'd prefer you rest, but your input is needed," she exhaled, struggling to her feet. "I'll be there," she said, ignoring the ache in her arm. She had chosen this path. She could not shirk her duties now. He nodded, eyes flicking to her injury. Gently, he guided her with a hand at her elbow, leading her to the council chamber. Inside, elders, senior warriors, and key pack members, including Beta Natalia, waited anxiously. Regina stood near the back, arms crossed, gaze flicking to the bandage on the Luna's arm with a cold twist of satisfaction. The new Luna felt that stare like a thorn, but ignored it. Alaric addressed the council, summarizing what Natalia and the Luna had encountered: an alliance of rogues and breakaway wolves, armed and hostile, turning away peaceful offerings. The pack's borders were at risk. "We must decide how to respond," he said, voice firm. "We either prepare for defense or attempt another negotiation with better terms. But I won't sacrifice the pack's safety. If they threaten war, we must be ready." Voices erupted in debate. Some demanded an immediate show of force, sending a sizable patrol to crush the rogue camp. Others urged caution, worried about provoking a larger conflict that might draw neighboring packs into a messy war. Regina seized the moment to criticize the Luna's mission. "Our new Luna's mercy has only emboldened them," she said icily. "We offered them gifts. Now they believe us weak." The Luna flinched inwardly, but forced a level tone. "Mercy is not weakness. The rogues are driven by desperation, but it's true that their leadership is fueled by resentment. We need a strong but measured response. If we attack, we risk unifying all the rogues under a calm banner of vengeance." An elder with a weathered face nodded slowly. "Wise words. Yet we can't ignore how close they are to our settlements." Natalia cleared her throat. "We can bolster our border patrols to contain them. Simultaneously, we can send word to that rival pack's main leadership, warning them not to harbor the rebels. If we isolate the rogues, they might lack resources." Regina snorted. "Always dancing around a fight. Sometimes direct confrontation is the only way." Alaric's voice cut through the bickering. "Enough. The Luna has risked her life seeking a peaceful path. We all must weigh the consequences carefully." He glanced at the new Luna, his expression supportive. "We'll strengthen patrols and attempt diplomatic outreach to the breakaway group's original pack. If the rogues continue hostile acts, we'll respond swiftly. Understood?" The council murmured agreement, though some, like Regina, appeared dissatisfied. Alaric's authority prevailed. The meeting ended, leaving the Luna and Alaric alone with Natalia and the elders to finalize details. Later, as the hall emptied, The Luna tried to steady her swirling thoughts. She felt Alaric's presence at her side, a calming anchor in the storm of guilt and frustration. "You did what you could," he said quietly. "This matter may not be resolved easily, but we'll stand united." She nodded, leaning into the solid comfort of his arm. "I only hope we can avoid a full-scale war." In the weeks that followed, the pack vigilantly guarded the northwest border. Small skirmishes erupted occasionally, but no large-scale assault came. The roving band of rogues seemed more interested in pillaging isolated areas than launching an all-out invasion. Yet tension remained high, overshadowing the pack's daily life. During this period, the new Luna continued fulfilling her duties, overseeing improvements to Omega living conditions, mediating disputes, and quietly providing moral support to those unnerved by the looming threat. Alaric stood by her publicly, defending her decisions despite persistent skepticism from certain corners. Their partnership grew closer, built on shared burdens. He allowed glimpses of vulnerability, and she offered solace without prying. Though love was not a word they spoke, something genuine blossomed between them. One late afternoon, after dealing with border updates, Alaric and the Luna found themselves walking through the orchard where they had once fought rogues. The tension of memory softened, replaced by new growth, small blossoms appearing on the apple trees, heralding a fresh season. Alaric paused under one tree, reaching up to touch a budding branch. "Our pack has endured so much lately," he said, voice low. "We lost one Luna, then gained another, an Omega, no less. Faced illusions, trials, and now this rogue threat. Sometimes it feels like we can barely catch our breath." She stood beside him, looking at the tender buds. "Yet we continue," she replied softly. "The orchard recovers from winter, just as we weather storms and find ways to keep living. None of it is easy, but we grow stronger, I think." He turned to her, a new light in his eyes. "I didn't realize how deeply I needed that perspective. You remind me that tragedy doesn't have to define us forever." Gently, he traced his fingertips over the scar on her arm, the result of the rogue's blade. "We bear scars, but they can guide us to become better." A stirring warmth suffused her chest. Meeting his gaze, she found understanding, acceptance, and a spark that hinted at deeper feelings. She hesitantly lifted her hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. He closed his eyes at the contact, exhaling softly. When he opened them again, she glimpsed a depth of emotion that nearly took her breath away. Wordlessly, he leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. A quiet gesture of intimacy. The orchard around them was still, the sunlight gilding the leaves in gold. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, a counterpoint to her own racing pulse. For the first time, she realized that perhaps they were no longer just fulfilling a duty to the pack. They were finding a bond that might heal them both. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I never imagined I could stand like this with someone else. But the goddess led me to you. And I think I'm ready to open my heart again, in time, if you'll have it." Tears prickled at her eyes. She cupped his cheek gently. "I'm here," she murmured, voice trembling with emotion. "Whenever you're ready." He lowered his lips to hers in a tender, tentative kiss, an unspoken promise of hope, trust, and a future they would build together. The orchard swayed around them, birds singing a quiet serenade. It was a moment of pure harmony, the final acceptance that their destinies were intertwined. That evening, they returned to the pack's estate hand in hand. News of the Luna's blossoming closeness to Alaric spread quietly, stirring varied reactions. Yet more wolves began to see her, not as an interloper, but as a true partner to their alpha, one who had proven her worth through adversity. The pack's mood cautiously shifted from doubt toward guarded optimism. Even long-time skeptics recognized that she governed with kindness and skill. Her new sense of belonging did not erase every challenge. She spent many nights working alongside Alaric, Natalia, and the elders, discussing strategies to keep the rogues in check, forging alliances with neighboring territories, and ensuring that the pack's defenses remained strong. But now, she faced these burdens with a sense of shared purpose and the comforting knowledge that Alaric walked beside her, not just as Alpha, but as a friend and potential mate in spirit. As weeks turned into months, the rogue threat gradually subsided. Perhaps the faction splintered or realized the pack was too vigilant to conquer. Attacks diminished, though the pack kept a wary eye on the borders. In the absence of immediate danger, the estate began hosting more gatherings, festivals to celebrate harvests, ceremonies of gratitude for the goddess's blessings. During one such festival, the Luna presided over a small ceremony of her own, honoring the Omega rank and unveiling new reforms that increased their rights and protections. Some in the pack were hesitant, but she gently reminded them that a pack united from top to bottom was far stronger than one that trampled the weak. Over time, these changes gained traction, improving morale and sparking a cautious admiration for the Luna who had once been an Omega herself. Eventually, on a warm afternoon, Alaric approached her, bearing a smile that reached his eyes. "The elders suggest we formalize our bond through the Luna's coronation ceremony, a tradition where you stand before the pack as my equal in name and station. Are you prepared for that?" She felt her heart flutter. The Luna trials had crowned her in the eyes of the goddess, but the coronation was the final seal in pack law. She swallowed, recalling how far she had come, how the goddess's sign still rested on her hand like a subtle reminder of destiny. "I am," she whispered, looking at him with a gentle smile. "If you are?" His expression glowed with quiet warmth. "I think I'm finally ready to embrace this future, to stand with you not just as a duty, but because my heart tells me it's right." A soft tear escaped her eye, and she nodded. "Then let's do it." The coronation ceremony took place under the moonlight in the same courtyard where she had once swept the floors. Now, it was adorned with lanterns and floral arches, a soft glow creating an ethereal atmosphere. The entire pack gathered, from the highest elders to the Omega rank. Some still harbored reservations, but many arrived out of respect for their new Luna's achievements. Dressed in a simple but elegant gown of pale silver fabric, she stood beside Alaric at the courtyard's center, beneath the carved stone archway she used to glimpse only from the outside. An elder approached, bearing a gleaming circlet fashioned in the shape of intertwining vines and a subtle crescent motif, an emblem of the Luna's authority. The elder lifted the circlet, speaking in a voice that carried across the courtyard. "By the will of the moon goddess and the trials that have been completed, we acknowledge this Omega who has become our Luna. May her reign bring unity, compassion, and strength to our pack. Alpha, will you bind yourself to her in leadership, honoring her as your partner and equal?" Alaric turned to her, eyes shining with sincerity. "I do," he said, his voice steady. She felt a rush of emotion, remembering all the sorrow he had endured, the fortress around his heart, and how it gradually opened to her. The elder placed the circlet gently on her head. It settled over her hair, a symbolic weight that sealed her transformation. "Luna, do you accept this honor and all the responsibilities it carries to stand beside your Alpha, protecting and guiding this pack?" She lifted her chin, voice resonating through the courtyard. "I do, with all my heart." A collective hush gripped the crowd. The elder stepped back, bowing deeply. Gradually, applause and howls of celebration rose, an outpouring of emotion. Some wolves blinked in surprise at their own acceptance of this new reality. Others, Omegas in particular, cheered with tears in their eyes, inspired by her triumphant ascension. Alaric took her hand, the warmth of his palm steady. As the crowd's howls filled the night, the two gazed at each other, a silent promise of devotion shimmering between them. Under the moon's watchful glow, they sealed their partnership with a gentle kiss. The pack's applause thundered anew, echoing off the courtyard walls. Through the swirl of joyous faces, the new Luna caught a glimpse of Ingrid and Regina, both standing apart, their expressions subdued. Perhaps acceptance would never fully come from them. But the Luna offered them a gracious nod all the same, determined to extend compassion despite their enmity. Because that was the core of her rule, a belief that every wolf, high or low, was worthy of care and respect. She had been the Luna they never wanted, but through courage, perseverance, and the goddess's guidance, she was exactly the Luna this pack needed. And now she would walk forward, hand in hand with Alaric, forging a future built on the hope that unity could indeed blossom from sorrow, and that an Omega could become a leader the entire pack would eventually trust with their bond, hearts, and lives.